from just outside the Empire City at the crossroads to the northeast. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are and whenever you are, this is your premier podcast for all things unknown, not media, and I'm your host, JP. Welcome to the 6th episode of Not Media, and this episode we are going to focus on the very strange story of the alleged alien or government base that exists in Dulce, New Mexico, supposedly under the Archuleta Mesa. This is quite a story, and before I get into it, I just want to go over some other things. But I know there's a lot of controversy over the story, and rightfully so. I also decided that I was going to try to track some video here, give a different mic setup and video. Normally, I don't do video on my solo podcast, but I can do some screen shares, see if people like that, maybe make it a little bit more interesting. If that's more popular, I can keep trying to do that. I can keep trying to do my solo podcast. I can do it with video also, and I can give you some screen shares. Somebody was recommending, somebody on my jiu-jitsu team says he does marketing for a living for podcasters, and he was saying that his experience is that it seems to be that the video podcasts are getting more popular, so people like to see facial expressions and they like to see screenshots and such. So I figured I'd give it a try to see how that works out. I was also able to interview for episode 7, which I'm still in the process of editing, an expert or somebody who's very familiar with UFO sightings and cases throughout the country and throughout the world, but somebody who lives in the Southwest and seems to know quite a bit about Dulce. Sounds like he's actually not a proponent of the underground alien government facility out there, but everybody does have the right to their opinions, based on their research. So you guys should tune in, check out episode 7. His name is Norio Hayakawa, and it was a good interview. He told us a lot of information that he has accrued over the years of doing research on the topic of UFOs, now UAPs. Getting, into today, before I start off, I just wanted to give a quick memorial for a friend of mine. If you guys listen to the podcast, you know that there's like a intro song at the beginning. I'm just going to take a minute just to kind of go over this because it's a little sad to me. And the song at the beginning of my podcast is actually a song from a 4-song demo that I had with a band when I was 18 years old called Outer Side Reverie. And we were only together for a short while, maybe, I would say less than a year, but we were together long enough to get a 4-song demo together and to, with that demo, play a couple of gigs in the local area. We had some, I can't even say we had a whole lot of interest from record labels or anything, or a huge fan base. We just, had a lot of practice sessions and a couple of shows that we did. So, and we have a cool demo out of it and a cool memory, but unfortunately, the song that I do the intro with, it's a guitar riff that I wrote for one of the first track on that 4-song demo. The demo was called Here Lies the Truth, and the song was called House of Mirrors, and that was the intro guitar riff to House of Mirrors, which is actually a pretty cool song. If anybody's interested, I could either post a YouTube video of it, or I can put the video up on email. I could attach it to an email. So whatever's easier, all depending on how many people are requesting to listen to it. But getting to the point, the guy who played drums on that album was a friend of mine growing up, and unfortunately, he recently passed away. His name was Tim Lewis. He had gotten, recently he had fallen into a little bit of trouble, and he had passed away last Saturday. So I want that this past week I want to say my last goodbyes to him, and certainly when I listen to the intro song every time I listen to this podcast now, and I hear the drum tracks on that album, I'm going to be thinking about him. And if you follow my last couple episodes of my podcast, I'm certainly a believer in some sort of a afterlife, especially after that interview I did with Paul Davids and about an atheist in heaven. So I just hope, if Tim's listening, whatever, wherever that may be, once we all pass from here into whatever the next plane of existence is, that he is in a place where he is able to experience love, happiness, and enjoyment. So, just like I said, wanted to just give him a quick memorial for the passing of an old friend of mine and somebody that helped me make some cool music along the way. So, moving forward, getting into this sticky mess that we call Dulce. I guess there was no pun intended, but there's certainly a pun there, because for those that know, Dulce means sweet in Spanish. And believe it or not, that's not the correct name for the town. Apparently, the name given by the locals there, before it was given over to tribal territory of a group of Native Americans named the Jicarilla Apache Nation, it was Dulce Agua, which I guess, yeah, you would say Dulce Agua in Spanish. I know usually with the adjectives and nouns, you would you flip them how you are in English. So if you said like blue pants, you would say, or black shoes, in English, you would say like zapatos negros in Spanish. You flip the adjective with the noun, the opposite of how we have it in English. But with certain words, I know I even get confused sometimes. It's with like modifier words. I don't know if you would just put, like, if you would say dulce agua or agua dulce. I believe it's just dulce agua, but that was the original name of the town. And I don't really know. When I did my interview with Norio Hayakawa, he explained how, I don't know, how people are, how words change with different areas of the country, why in some areas we have nicknames for certain words and dialects and jargon. I don't know if just over time people just stopped using the word agua and just said dulce. And so now the town formally is known as Dulce, even if you look it up on a map, that's the name of the town. But apparently that name was supposed to be Sweetwater, not just sweet. So, but it's a small town in northern New Mexico. Believe it borders Colorado. And let me see. The mountain range, I know there's the Archuleta Mesa, the area where this supposed base is. That is, I don't know what part. Well, this is a question I didn't ask when I was doing my research. I know there's a whole group of mountains out there. I don't know if it's part of like a certain. I know it's part of Hickory Apache reservation, which is a territory. There we go. So it's actually looks like Archuleta Mesa is a mountain, part of the San Juan Mountains in the United States. So I just learned that right now. So now we know that the Archuleta Mesa is part of the San Juan Mountains in northern New Mexico. And like I said, right up on the border, hugging the border of southern Colorado. Let's try to, without spending a boatload of time getting lost in, because there's just so many people that came forward with this story, and it's so hard to quantify anything. You know, I think it's an interesting story, and a lot of people find it fascinating just because it's just such a strange story, and that there is some substance to it. And after interviewing Norio and after reading multiple accounts from multiple supposed whistleblowers, I do not. Let's see. I personally, it's like, I think like everybody wants to believe. It's like the same thing. Like I listen to Joe Rogan sometimes, and like he kind of says the same thing. Like these stories, some of these stories are just so fascinating. Like the inclination is like, well, how cool would that be to believe this? So, like with that said, you got to put the brakes on a little bit. You know, it's like it's easy to walk down the rabbit hole on this one, and it's real hard to actually quantify any of these claims other than just hearing personal stories. Interestingly enough, I'll get into it, but I did come across some information that I felt was somewhat quantifiable. When it comes to this story, that's a tall drink right there, because there's just so much weirdness with this one. I will still do the screen shares. I decided, just because of some distractions, had my dogs barking and such, I was just going to kill the camera, because it's just that much harder to do editing when I have to edit the video with the audio and start clipping the audio out with video. So it's a lot easier for me if, I have to clip a segment of audio out because of a distraction or something, for me just to rock with that, So this story comes about first because of a man named Paul Benowitz. He was a scientist for a company called, I believe, Thunder Scientific. My understanding is his son still owns Thunder Scientific. Paul has since passed away, but the company is still run by his sons, and I forget exactly what they do. Some sort of instrumentation for military contractors. I forget exactly what it is. I haven't really looked into the company too much or looked them up too much. But so anyhow, Paul Benowitz stated that he had some sightings of some unknown objects flying in and out of hidden entrances, ships that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. He got a shot of a strange Bigfoot-looking creature. So he was shooting photographs of objects. A lot of people said they were from the Manzano storage area where they were storing nuclear weapons at the time. So there were many people, including a Native American chief. Just Native Americans from the Hickory Apache, and a police chief who made a strange sighting of the area. Strange cattle mutilations with balls of light, very well documented. There was a man also named Manuel Gomez who lost 17 cows in the Dulce area. He also found gas masks, and the cows had phosphorescent markings on them when he looked through a certain type of lighting. So he believes it was done by the government, these mutilations of these cows. And just to get a little bit into that, I took some notes, and I've just read so many accounts over the years of just a lot of strangeness and weirdness. And I guess that's one thing about this Dulce story, is it kind of like starts to give some meat to this story. And people who are non-believers of the non-human aspect of the Dulce are going to say, well, it's real convenient, when you can't explain something, you just say, well, aliens did it, and that's why people start laughing at you. Because I heard I was listening to a podcast of somebody who was covering the story about Benowitz, and basically how he was a pawn in a disinformation game. And he mentioned Linda Moulton Howe, and he has somehow threw her name in there. And, he was saying, oh, well, Linda said, because you can't explain it with, some sort of prosaic explanation, we'll just say aliens did it, and that's like throwing mud in the face of these UFO researchers. I think that has been going on since the beginning of UFO research, pretty much, and they're contestant with the government. I'm not sitting here trying to claim anything just yet. I'm just saying that you got these two camps of people, and it's almost like this day and age, and being, I'm using politics as an example, but I'm not going to get into politics because that's kind of not one of my MOs for this podcast. But just say, like, people who are devoutly Democratic or devoutly Republican, and their claims, I've seen enough arguments over the years to just say, this group believes one thing, this group believes another thing, and never the two shall meet, So they'll sit there and argue to the death, because one group's not going to want to hear the other group, and one group's not going to. And it's almost kind of like that with these really polarizing topics, such as Dulce. So I'm just here to kind of try to shed some light, because of my curiosity, like, what is going on out there? What is going on? It's just super strange, So you have these cattle that are getting mutilated. I don't know if you guys ever saw any pictures. I'll just kind of start noting some shots that I have. I do have some shots of the New Mexican state trooper. His name is Gabriel or Gabe Valdez. He was put on the trail of trying to solve these cattle mutilations, because there were lots of strange sights of lights in the area, and then these cows were turning up dead, and they were drained of blood, but yet they had no vascular collapse, which is odd. Because you'd think if you slowly like put an IV in someone or let them bleed to death, that their veins would collapse, they would have vascular collapse, but yet somehow these cows didn't, and their eyes were cored out, some of their anuses were cored out, almost like a plug, with surgical precision. Their uteruses were cored out, sometimes their sexual organs were cored out, and then once they dropped them back off, whoever dropped them back off, a lot of times bugs would die if they touched the cow, coyotes and animals that, like vultures, that would normally pick these carcasses clean. If a cow just died from, let's say, didn't have enough water or something, or just kind of just fell weak because of old age, eventually scavengers would pick these animals off pretty fast. Ant bugs, scavengers. I mean, nature just cleans up, so it's not uncommon for this to happen. It's kind of the way of nature for, animals to get, whatever's left of the animal to kind of go back to nature by either insects eating it, scavengers eating it, mold, and, so decomposition. So it usually doesn't take long for an animal to be consumed by whatever the and the wildlife and just other occurrences in the area. But these animals, no, these animals would not be touched by these. So something was going on with these animals. There had to be something going on. Either it's some sort of electromagnetic or it's a chemical signature. There's got to be something going on with these animals, clearly, if an insect is dying when it touches it. So what is exactly that's going on? And I'm surprised. I mean, maybe if this happened, because they are still happening today, like you'd take a sample of the flesh or the area that these are damaged on these animals and send it out to a laboratory and try and figure out, well, is there a chemical present? Like, what's going on with these animals? Because this isn't something that just kind of stopped in the, what was this, Gabriel Valdez started researching this in the mid 1970s, 76, I believe. And let's say there was other gas mask, Manuel Gomez, it's stating in one book I read that the man who lost his cows thinks there is an underground government facility in the Dulce area, but he thinks it's the government that's doing this to the cows. Hoyt Vanderlei, a former police officer, wouldn't even want to would want to try to send up a expedition to see what's going on up there on top of the mesa. I thought when I interviewed Norio that he stated that this was a friend of his, Hoyt Velarde, and I think he said he had cancer. So it seemed like Norio was thinking that like this was a government thing relative to Project Gas Buggy, which was trying to stir up some geological activity for natural gas using nuclear weapons. I think it was called Project Plowshare. I think the government was trying to use this stockpile of nuclear weapons they had for some sort of good, as opposed to just destruction and, what the overarching society felt was just a big evil. So, Valdez actually went to go on to write a book called The Dulce Base, which goes into his account of all his investigations over the years. I can get a little bit more into that and who he talked to. So I'm just going to be making notes as I'm going along here, because when I do post a video of this, I can start throwing some pictures in here. I have like a screenshot of his base. I can throw up as you see here, as I'm doing now. I'm just trying to make a note of it now. Let's see. Gabe Julian, also a former police officer, saw 3 objects hovering while he was responding to a police call in the area. Some believe that the Dulce base is a disinformation campaign. Some believe that there's not a whole lot of truth going on about a base being out there, that this is just a disinformation ploy that the government has to, like Norio stated, that he feels like maybe the government is using this as a almost like a cover to cover up maybe some of the negative health effects, like why his friend, former police officer Velarde, I think that was the man he stated, one of these former police officers has cancer now, And he's thinking maybe there was, because of this nuclear testing out there was chemicals in the area, and the government started testing the cow to sample to see how much chemicals were being put into the wildlife as a way to monitor the damage that was caused from these projects. So, and that could very well be there could very well be some truth to that. There's references to Dulce Base, like I said, being disinformation, and more is in a book called Underground Alien Biolab at Dulce, the Benowitz UFO Papers by Timothy Green Beckley and Krista Tilton. And his story started in 1979 when he was citing these objects, and apparently he lived next to Kirkland Air Force Base, Benowitz. And I told you it's next to the Manzano storage area, which is the largest nuclear underground storage facility, as well as Coyote Canyon Test Range. And Benowitz corresponded with two females who also think they were the victims of abductions and taken to an underground laboratory, have some sort of an, let's see, one of these ladies thought maybe the government was intervening and screening these abductions. So they had like an agent following them around afterwards. And a little background on the town of Dulce. It's a small little town. Has only a population of about 2,600 people. But somehow almost all those people have had a UFO sighting in the past 30 years, which is the highest percentage of any community in the United States. So that should tell you something right there. Like that alone is something very strange. Why so many UFO sightings there? Another individual that was associated with being a whistleblower was a man named Thomas Costello. And he was planned to be a security guard from the Dulce base, which he died afterwards in an alleged suicide. And there was another whistleblower via a book called UFO Highway, written by Anthony Sanchez, who stated that Costello was just a made-up person, that he didn't actually exist. And a lot of people also believe that Paul Benowitz eventually got put in touch with Myrna Hansen and Krista Tilton, and through Officer Valdez, and just from his own research, it seems to be that he was able to kind of tune into like a triangular area where there was a lot of UFO sightings, and he kind of did the math where a UFO base might be. And there's other people out there who are saying no, Air Force Office of Special Investigation agent, counterintelligence agent named Rick Doty fed him disinformation. That's why he thought these objects that he was filming and then afterwards communicating with through some program that he had developed, or someone had given him a laptop. There's just a lot of question marks over exactly how he came about to know or think there was an alien base under the Archuleta Mesa, or how exactly he thought he was communicating with these aliens via this computer program. Colonel X is the guy who is the whistleblower from Anthony Sanchez's retired lieutenant colonel, who gave an account of being one of the security guards at Dulce, or working for a security division at Dulce. Stated that Benowitz discovered it himself because he was on top of all the big UFO sightings of the time in the area. And other people say that it was Rick Doty that put him onto Dulce, just completely to throw him off the path. It's what they call a red herring, they completely put him off the path. They say, oh yeah, because you were filming real lights that were strange lights and that were unknowns, maybe by the nuclear testing facility or the nuclear storage facility. Rick Doty stepped in and said, oh wow, this guy's onto something, and he's talking about it and he's making waves. Let's get him off the trail. Let's put him onto some mountain range. Let's make up some story about an underground alien base. I think maybe he'll grab that one and run with it. And jumping around a bit, like I said, you could read one book, and it's like if you read one book by one person, somebody's got an agenda, and they're going to be trying to sell you something. So they're going to try to put the spin that everybody is either pro Dulce or against Dulce, and then which means you have to read different accounts and different books. And I notice there's a lot of people that won't read anything. They'll just say, "Oh, it's just such a fantastic story. I'm not even going to get into it. I'm not going to waste any brain power, or I'm just not going to be associated with something that I'm going to be embarrassed about." Kind of like, off the topic when I was talking about the Paul David story, how when he was trying to get the document with the ink blot, and this is involving, if you didn't listen to episode, I believe it was 4 and 5, it was about contact with somebody who had passed away, and there was some physical evidence left over from one of these experiences that one of the scientists who was trying to, analyze the sample was in the lab, and they were trying to just cue him in on what was going on because he happened to be in the lab that night, and this man wanted just about nothing to do with this investigation. He literally was scared to even have his name associated with it. That's how worried he was. Didn't want to know the results of their experiment. Didn't want another experiment. The second he found out what was going on, he just completely shut them out. Didn't want to be part of the documentary. Was just so it's like, I noticed that, and I noticed that with a lot of people, even people who claim to be investigators. They just shut down. They say, nope, that can't be true. I'm just not even going to look there because it's just an absolute waste of my time. So, and if you have that attitude, then you don't, find the needles in the haystacks. And sometimes you do find these. And I know I did a whole ton of research on Roswell, and I found a bunch of those. So it's, sometimes you got to pick through a whole bunch of nonsense in order to find something that actually looks like it's shiny and looks like it actually makes some sense. And sometimes it does make some sense. So that's the thing with these accounts. You really got to start looking into some of these people and who they were, and, were they real? Were they not real? Was their story real? Was their story not real? What can be quantified? What can't? And a lot of this stuff is, like I said, he said, basically she said. Some people say Benowitz was a victim of disinformation. I think there certainly is some truth to that. And then some people say there was also some truth to some of the things that he was talking about and writing. So, where that line is it's hard to be able to quantify that without actually interviewing a man or speaking to his family. I think from what I heard, I don't know how open his sons are to talk about what he was involved with or how much they would actually know at this point exactly all these facts and details. But jumping forward, like I said, I'm going to just say in 2016, the author of UFO Highway, which involved a whistleblower about Dulce, Sanchez, who is the author, talks about how Benowitz cited in his personal notes. So Sanchez saw Benowitz's. So this is why I wrote this down, because after listening to a whole episode of a podcast, there were some things that were worth noting, because like I said, if you have that skeptical, negative, I remember Stanton Friedman used to say, negative, nasty skeptics. He called them armchair critics, because while he was out there putting the work in, sifting through the haystack, looking for the needle, which is the hard work. He was out there doing it, going to the archives, going to the National Congress Library, digging up crates and just going through boxes and boxes and boxes of documents, looking for that needle in that haystack. He was out there doing it. He was out there living that life. And yet he had to contend against these armchair skeptics that would just sit home, be negative, nasty, contribute zero to the investigation of what he was doing, but yet somehow feel that they were in a position to just dump water all over all of his research. So, and it's the same thing with this. There's people out there that want to do zero work, but I think it's hardwired into the human psyche that people like recognition. People like status. They like to feel like they're intelligent, even if they're not, or like to feel like they've won something and get that recognition for being on the podium, even if they don't put the work in to get on the podium. So I've noticed this, like I said, I work law enforcement. You have people that impersonate police officers, people that impersonate military veterans. They wear the uniforms and the medals. There's actually a law against that called stolen valor. There's people that like to get the credit. And I think an easy way in this game, in this UFO game, to get that credit is to be one of these types of people, these people that Friedman would call negative, nasty armchair skeptics. Because in order to get the facts straight, you got to get your hands dirty. You're going to have to go out there. You're going to have people probably say things about you because you're inquiring into things that a lot of people are just going to write off. So you got to have that fortitude to push forward into the unknown and, at some level be okay with the resistance that you're going to encounter along the way. But if you keep that open-minded attitude, as I try to have, and realize that nothing good is going to come to you easy, that you're going to have to dig around for something that piques your interest or, raises your eyebrows to the point where you can say, wow, that's a coincidence. That's not just a minor coincidence. This is a coincidence that is worth noting. And that's what I'm about to talk about right now. One of those coincidences. So in a 2016 interview with Jimmy Church, who is has his own podcast called Fade to Black, or his own radio show. And he also is a common guest host on Coast to Coast AM. Anthony Sanchez talks about how Benowitz cited in his personal notes that he saw a teardrop. So this is from Benowitz's personal notes. He saw a teardrop-shaped UFO he could see close enough where he could see inside of it. He actually saw inside of it with this, this zoom lens, this camera he was using. And he saw within this teardrop-shaped UFO, he could see an alien. And he said the inside of the craft had lavender lighting. Lavender lighting. So that's a pretty specific fact. I don't know how often I've seen a car or a ship or any sort of craft that I've ever seen have lavender lighting on the inside of it, but if ever, I don't believe I ever have. So, Sanchez had a conversation with in 2016. So this would have been 2016, a current chief of police in the area. So near the area of Dulce, a current chief of police, 2016. And mind you, Benowitz's sightings, he was noting all throughout looks like early 1980s, late 1970s to early 1980s, because Benowitz passed away in 2003, and I think he had some sort of a mental breakdown from a lot of this disinformation campaign that he got caught right up in the middle of. So I don't know exactly when this Benowitz sighting was, but all I know is that the current police chief had zero knowledge of Benowitz's sighting. Zero. And this police chief said that he was near the Archuleta Mesa and saw a teardrop. So there we go. We have a match on that. A match on that. He saw a teardrop-shaped UFO with a gray alien in it. And he was so close to the craft, he could see the lavender lighting inside. So, I mean, just on that description alone, I mean, first off, how common is it to see a UFO? I mean, I could be honest and say, I don't know. I thought I saw something one time way up in the sky, but I wasn't sure. It was a daytime sighting. I mean, it could have just been somebody letting it go a party balloon for all I know. I just didn't have any sort of visual aid strong enough to really get me a confirmation on what I was looking at. But I definitely saw something strange one time, but you know, I'm not 100% bent on that it was a UFO. It was just something that I wasn't sure what it was, some sort of a silvery type of object. For all I know, it could have been, like I said, a balloon from a birthday party, a group of balloons from a birthday party that blew out of a backyard and up, you know, 20, 30,000 plus whatever feet up in the air, and it was just hard to see or hard to identify because it was reflecting sunlight and moving around. So like I said, you know, I've never even 100% think I've seen a UFO. So for a police officer who's now a police chief to say he saw a teardrop shaped UFO, that's a very specific type of UFO. And he was close enough to see an alien inside of it, and then to see it also had lavender lighting, and within the same exact area. I mean, it could have been the same time period. I mean, I don't know when this officer had this sighting, but so I'm not going to speculate. So, but all I know is within the same area, somebody independently corroborated that they saw a teardrop-shaped UFO with an alien inside of it and lavender lighting inside of it. I mean, the description is the same exact object, independently stated from two different sources that did not know each other and that did not even know they each had this sighting. So, I mean, I would say that's at least pause for concern to say, you know, this could potentially be that there was some type of teardrop shaped object. I mean, just with the two witnesses, you know, anytime I hear two witnesses who don't know each other, who don't know each other's story, who have had no contact with each other and, you know, never knew the other one even existed and, you know, never knew anything about what the other person ever saw in their life. And yet they come forward with a matching account of something that they saw. You know, I think that gives, I would say, a little bit of credence, at least, to say that, you know, there's a possibility that, you know, minus the fact that one of them's lying and they did know each other, they did read about like the other one's sighting. I mean, you can't factor that out. You know, maybe one of them, you know, you can't factor that out ever. But I mean, you know, you got to just look at the content of the character of the people coming forward and kind of have to make that judgment call for yourself. But so that was pause for concern. And then what else did we have? And he was also bombarded at one of these. They have these conferences every year called the Dulce UFO conference. Sanchez was bombarded with people who were saying that they hear traffic under their houses. Mind you, this is a very desolate area. What would we say, 2,600 people for the whole area, town. And we're talking about a whole big swath of acres and acres of land on this Indian reservation. And people can swear, even though they're in the middle of nowhere where there's not much going on, that they hear traffic under their houses. Like there's a highway under their houses and they can hear vehicular traffic, you know, emanating from underground. So that's very strange. What else do we have here? Krista Tilton, she claims that she was abducted multiple times. That's one of the supposed victims of abduction by, she was abducted by either gray or human-looking types of aliens who implanted fertilized ova in her, and then she would be pregnant, then she wouldn't be pregnant. And this isn't the first time we've heard of this. We've heard this in abduction claims before, how some of these women claim that they're somehow find themselves pregnant without having, had any intercourse, and then they find themselves not pregnant 3 months later. It's very, very strange, these accounts. Let's see. She was taken to an underground facility. Some man in a lab coat performed a vaginal exam to her. She said aliens were also present at this facility. There was a man in a lab coat, like I said. And she asked him where she was going, and he said she couldn't go down to any of the other levels. The next day she woke up by her car, and she had red scratches down her back, confirming that something had happened to her. She was taken somehow. I think this happened in like the mid-1980s. And then afterwards, some man named John Wallace approached her, showed her a government ID card, and he said he claimed to have known about her abductions. Some type of agreement was struck between this group of inhabitants in a mountain range and the U.S. government, i.e. this would be Dulce facility. And they're allowing these abductions to occur, these contractors or this government entity from the United States. There's no clarity involving this agreement. And I don't even know if they're stating that they could prevent these abductions anyhow. And then Krista gets into another man named Donovan Masters. One of Krista's drawings closely resembles a police officer's drawing from 1967 of a sighting that he had, even though her sighting was 20 years later. Donovan Masters claims that he was harassed after his experience. He thought he was taken to an underground laboratory or something similar to her experience. And his name really, I think that was a pseudo name because he was scared about coming forward with his real name, Samuel Paul Halcombe. He, at the time in 2005, he maintained a website, and he had another missing time experience. So this is all, there's just so many people that claim to have these missing time experiences. I don't know how we can quantify dragging this all the way back to Dulce. Krista gave a interview to her husband at the time in 1989. Tom Adams was a UFO researcher. Tom has since passed away. In 2014, they were divorced in 1991. During the interview Krista was given by her husband and UFO researcher Tom Adams, she states that she had a very close friend who was had a connection with members of the High Council in the Jicarilla Apache tribe. And this man doesn't normally speak to outsiders. And that was one of like the overarching big problems that I had when I was doing this research is that, and obviously this is something that the skeptics are going to jump all over because, it's just anytime you can jump all over something and just throw water on it, you might as well do it. Like I said, just with that attitude. But the people there, they just don't like to speak to people that aren't outside of their tribe. So if you're somebody who's not part of the Jicarilla Apache tribe and you come in there, first of all, you can't even get on that land if you don't have a guide or someone who from the tribe is going to let you on. And second of all, they don't like to talk to people that are not part of the tribe. They don't trust them. I'm not going to get into who, what, how, or why, but it's just what it is. So to even have a close friend from the tribe, I guess is a big plus, because then you could start to get some of this inside information from these people who have decades and decades and decades of experience by that mesa, with these sightings, with these supposed beings that are out there. So this is another eyebrow-raising account. And, you know, other than these, a lot of these accounts, it's, like I said, it's hard to quantify anything. It's like people, I know, I get it. Everyone wants to say, oh, well, show me the proof. You know, give me a alien skull. Give me a piece of a UFO ship. And even if you gave them that, they might say it was a hoax or something like that. So some people are going to be hard to impress. You're just, no matter what you come forward with, they're just going to not want to listen to you. But in the spirit of doing thorough research, you have to go through all the information to try to see what's there or what's not there. So, during this interview, Chris has stated that she had a friend who was very close with, I guess there was a hierarchy in the Hickory Apache tribe, and this man was very close with the high council of the tribe. And this man, apparently, who was also part of the tribe, doesn't speak to outsiders, and was hiking near the Archuleta Mesa. So if this interview was 1989, I think you said, was it within the past couple of years? So what? Let's say 1987 this occurred. And as he was hiking, he said he felt some rocks. He was above a ledge, you know, as you're going up the side of a hill, and there were some gravel that was kicked into his face or whatever, like fell down to his face. So he naturally, when you're hiking, I mean, if you had some gravel falling you from above, you would look up, right? What the hell's going on? Is a rock about to fall on my head? And he looked up, and he said he saw what appeared to be a rock on the ledge, like upwards where he was hiking. There was a rock that was hinged outwards, almost like it was a door, like it was swiveled outwards. And in the doorway where this rock had been swiveled, there was a grayish being with milky white eyes staring down at the ledge at him. And he thought he was seeing things, actually. He thought he was seeing something, like he had to rub his eyes because he didn't believe what his eyes were showing him. So he rubbed his eyes, and then he looked back up. And when he looked back up a second time, the being was still standing there. So he confirmed that this wasn't some sort of a hallucination, because he rubbed his eyes and then he looked back up, and he became very frightened, and he ran for his life. And like I said, this took place in the mid-1980s. So, you know, you have somebody who's, unfortunately, I mean, even if this guy did come forward and put his name on the line and put his reputation on the line to come forward with a story like this, what proof does he have that it actually occurred? You know, how much opposition he would face, and the name calling and this and that. So it's almost like a lot of people experiencing these type of things, they don't even come forward. It's just not worth the headache. According to science fiction writer Isaac Asimov, there are advantages to living underground, such as a constant temperature of 55 to 60 degrees and protection from the sun, weather, and natural disasters. Underground structures are also resistant to earthquakes, causing only 1/5 of the damage they would to above ground structures. I already kind of started getting into a little bit about Project Gas Buggy a little bit back. And just a couple more facts. We did get into this in my interview with Norio, so I don't want to really spend too much time on it, but I already kind of stated what I mean, I have all the technical facts of Gas Buggy here. And I'll spend, I don't know, a brief moment on this real quick, just to kind of let you know some of the technical facts. It was a 26 kiloton nuclear device that was detonated 4,240 feet below ground in a sealed well in San Juan Basin in New Mexico on December 10th, 1967. And as I already stated, it was part of Project Plowshare. Now, looking further into Gabriel Valdez and Manuel Gomez, they were smart enough to notice that some of these cows looked like they were somehow being marked, because there had to be some method to the madness. There was just too many damn cows from this guy Gomez disappearing, and they were like, who's taking them? How are they taking them? They had this whole thing. I originally had just a ton of notes taken from these. I think I lost a bunch of my notes for some reason in this app I was using. Still trying to get the knack of how to correctly take just a boatload of notes without and keeping them accurate and being able to transfer them from my phone. But anyhow, I still have a bunch of notes here, but I had more. If I have a lot here, I probably had another 4 or 5 pages easily that I don't have in front of me anymore because they got somehow deleted out of this app. So just off the top of my head, I'll try to fill in what I don't have off the top of my head with stuff that I do have. And looks like, they were smart enough to be able to figure out like what was going on with these cows. Why were they dying off so much? Why were they getting them? Clearly, they weren't just dying. They were getting mutilated. Somebody was taking them, and somebody was mutilating these cows. So they figured there had to be some sort of like a systematic approach to who was taking them or what they were doing. And they were out there one night. I remember they were chasing these things around, these lights. They would chase them. They'd go on these expeditions and they would get on CB radios or whatever, walkie-talkies, and they would try to pin these lights down. Like 2 cars would come from one way and one would come from another way. And one night they even had like one of these lights pinned down between some trees, and they were like surrounded on all sides, and this thing just like disappeared. And they just weren't able to track these things down to a point where they could get close enough to positively identify who the culprit was. They were pretty confident. That whoever was behind these lights was also behind some of these cattle mutilations, but they just couldn't get the culprit pinned down long enough to be able to identify them. But so they figured out that these cows were being marked, and when they passed an ultraviolet light across some of these cows, when they passed them through a chute, they found out on the right leg and right side of the neck there was potassium and ultraviolet light and like glitter, almost like they were marked somehow, but you couldn't see the markings with normal light. Like it wasn't super apparent in the daytime, but if you held a special light to some of these cows, they were marked. So when they found out the potassium content of these hides were 70% higher than normal. As we'll get into it in a little bit further, Colonel X stated that these cows were actually being marked by this gray population, which actually had a home, for lack of a better word. I'm not even going to say base. So when I say base, it infers that there's some sort of like a secondary home for these grays. And apparently from, this whistleblower that had come forward, this was the primary location for these grays to be living. There was no secondary home for them. So, their home was under this mesa, and they were the ones that were conducting a lot of this genetic testing for multiple purposes, and they would mark them before they went out there and did whatever they had to do to them. I'll get into it in a little bit. Yes, I'm going to get into it in a little bit because it turns out, and this is a true story, it's hard to wrap your head around this one. But there was actually, in 1956, I'll get into the name, and I'll get into the situation. You know, I know it happened in 1956, and I see my notes here moving forward, who it was and who was witness. But it was actually a witness abduction of a military member. Believe this or not, you don't have to believe it because it's true. There was a witnessed abduction by a member of the military. Witnessed by another member of the military. Man was seen getting basically dragged off by a UFO by his leg. And this man turned up 3 days after his disappearance, naked, with his anus cored out, his genitals removed, and his eyes cored out. And he had no blood left in his body. There was no vascular collapse. Does that sound familiar? It should, because this is exactly the sort of work that's being done to these cows. So, without getting too malevolent sounding, you could state that, oh, like this was going on by our government, so whoever was doing this decided to do it to a person too. So our government then, if that's the perspective you want to take, was responsible for murdering this man. And it sounds like a lot of these cows, they were saying, had this done to them when they were still alive. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just very, very strange. You know, you actually had these cows having these strange mutilations and these strange death, but it happened to a person also. Same exact type of mutilation happened to a person, and it was witnessed. It's not like this. We assume that this is what happened. Like, we're like, oh, we don't know. This guy disappeared. Some cult got their hands on him, and then next thing you know, he turns up naked and mutilated, because that would be easy to say if that's what we had. We didn't have a witness, but for this, we actually had a witness. And there was a man abducted by a UFO, witnessed by a member of the military, and he turned up 3 days later, dead and mutilated, just like these cows, in the same exact fashion. Like, if you took the type of procedure done to these cows, and it was done to this man, unfortunately, you know, however terrible that must have been for him to have to experience that. So whoever is out and about doing this to the cows has done this to a person before within the past, 70 years? 1956, so we're coming up on 2023, so 2026 it'll be 70 years. So next time you hear cattle abduction or cattle mutilation, know that it wasn't strictly the cattle. This has happened to people before, or at least a person. And I remember reading about, in one of Richard Dolan's books I read at some point, there was a man in the northeastern part of the United States who also went missing and then came up with these same sort of types of wounds that were seen with these cow. So, yeah, very, very odd. But ultimately, there has to be an explanation. I mean, we could assume that it's the same parties that are responsible. But ultimately, without interviewing these parties, which seems to be very difficult, or maybe not so much, if you read the account of Colonel X, who states that he was a member of a security team that hasn't worked in the function of a psychologist, who worked at this facility that actually found a pre-existing group of inhabitants that lived under the Archuleta Mesa, and then eventually it was retrofitted with a genetics laboratory, which is currently in operation. 2023 still is functional there, and that is the purported Dulce lab. So we do have a whistleblower, and I'm going to get into that in just a little bit, but the whistleblower had some eyebrow-raising testimony to back up his account of his story, including discharge papers from the military stating the security force that he claimed he worked on there, which had no other classification known in the military, directly from the government, and he also passed 2 independent lie detector tests when he told his account of what happened there. So maybe puts a little bit of a spin on how you could start trying to group all this weirdness that's going on out there in the Southwest, because it is the inordinately high amount of UFO sightings per person, the strange animal mutilations that are real. They're definitely going on. You can't ignore that, you know. A cow's not a little animal, you know. You can't ignore a cow being abducted, and you know, this isn't the first witnessed abduction. I mean, one of the woman, I'm just going to get into that now. One of the woman that came forward to Paul Benowitz stated that she had been abducted with her son, Myrna Hansen, in 1980, and with being abducted by her son, she actually observed a cow being abducted too. So she saw the cow being abducted. She and her son were abducted. She had missing time, which is standard for people that claim that they were abducted. And on top of all of that, she actually saw the cow being cut up. She was in close enough proximity in this craft when she was taken where she saw this animal being taken into a room and cut up while still alive. So, you know, it's like, as fantastic as it sounds, we're just on the cusp of starting to recognize that maybe this phenomena of alien abduction is real. If you don't know, I'm going to tell you. President Obama owns a production company. I forget the name. I think it's like Blue Light Productions or something. But they're in the process of making a movie or a Netflix series on the Betty and Barney Hill abductions. And I can tell you right now, before it's made, if they do it right, it's probably going to be a real popular show. It's going to be controversial, but it's going to be popular. And it's going to have all sorts of people, all walks of life, and all types of people that up until now have not given alien abductions a second thought other than to crack jokes at them. It's going to kind of throw all these people into the pool of researchers that, you know, want to get to the bottom of what's going on with all that. You know, just like everybody wanted to be the expert on serial killers after the whole Dahmer series, if anybody got a chance to watch that and how good it was. And everybody wanted to be an expert on serial killers after Dahmer. And then everybody wanted to be obsessed with serial killers, you know, like, so if this Netflix series is done right, and it sounds like they're taking their time with it, so it very well might be done right. It's going to take a case that was a national case, but, you know, 2023, unless you're actively involved in UFO research, and I mentioned the name Betty and Barney Hill, you might not have ever heard about these two individuals, but it's going to, and the reason, yeah, for a second, you know, I lost track. The reason that I'm mentioning Betty and Barney Hill is because from my homework, I'm going to get into it on another episode of the podcast, but it seems to be a bona fide case where you have some type of circumstantial evidence to support the claim of what happened to these individuals, and therefore giving some credence to the alien abduction phenomena. Like I said, another topic, another case, but just know, because we're kind of circling back and dealing with an abduction, I don't have any reason to believe right now that the beings that abducted Betty and Barney Hill were the same beings that purportedly exist at this underground laboratory of Dulce. I don't know. I just don't have enough information. It sounds like, from the description, from what I remember reading the book a bunch of years back, captured by Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Marden, which is Betty's niece. They co-wrote a book together about the abduction case, and I'm going to read it again probably before I do my podcast, but just from the description I remember reading, I don't believe this group of inhabitants of this unknown ship was a matching physical description of the supposed gray aliens, or the types of gray aliens that were under the Archuleta Mesa. So, yeah. So, when people are questioning the reality of this in a very near future, that this could be real, we'll say, well, if one happened, then like, why are we boxing everything out? Why are we saying that this can't be happening also? Well, if we know that alien abductions have occurred before, they say in order to prove that there are white crows, all you have to do is find one white crow. All you have to do is find one. And you could say, oh, yeah, well, white crows are real, even though if it's super rare, and, so it's like, Betty and Barney Hill might be the white crow for all the garbage that you've heard, for all the nonsense that you've heard in the course of alien abduction, and the jokes and the moonshine and the mountains and people that aren't well educated, and all the dirt that has been thrown on people throughout the years, which has caused many thousands of people, I know for a fact, many thousands of people to just shut their mouths when something strange happens to them in the middle of the night and they got no one to cry to or no one to run to. This is going to start giving credence to some of these people's claims. So it's going to bring a lot of people forward with the confidence to talk about their stories. So once that starts happening, then you got to start scratching your head and saying, all right, well, this lady, Myrna Hansen, she claims to have this missing time, which is experienced by a lot of people who are abducted. She claims to have seen a cow taken into the same ship she was taken. We know these cattle mutilations are going on. We know they're super strange. It's almost, at the time, it was the incisions that were being done to these cows were beyond the scope of what we were capable of doing. Like the cuts, there was no burn. It was almost done with a laser, where these cores of their bodies were getting plugged out. Like the uterus was just getting like cored out, like with like a laser precision. And at the time, in the mid 1970s, there was no burn marks. There was no technology currently being used in any of the world of medical that could account for not having any sort of burn marks or no vascular collapse. Like, this was beyond the scope of what humans were capable of doing at the time. It was, I don't know. And I'm just saying that it was, if you read the accounts of what was left over from these animals, it's easy to say like, oh yeah, it was just some government project. But then you start factoring in witnesses who have come forward and stating that they've actually witnessed some of these abductions. This man from the military that had a abduction that was witnessed, and he turned up mutilated. Think about that just for a split second. Would we, if it was a secret project, would we really be abducting our own military members and brutally murdering them and returning their bodies mutilated, naked in a field? I mean, the thought of that almost gives me more the creeps than if it were some group of non-humans, honestly. To think that we could be doing that to ourselves. That's freaking crazy. I mean, that just kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies, like what sort of twisted government projects are actually going on. And we know weird stuff is going on in the past. Don't get me wrong. I'm not ignorant to that. But like I said, it's just a lot that has come forward with this. Moving forward, try to move this along here. Paul Benowitz. Okay, yeah, we're talking about Paul Benowitz again. Him when he spoke with Rick Doty about how 90% of maybe what Benowitz was coming forward with was true. But, if Rick Doty was feeding him, let's say 10% false information, and they're able to catch him on one of these false one of these facts, this fake news, whatever the term been going around when you're given false information. But in this case, because this was a military objective, maybe they felt Benowitz was getting too close to something involving UFOs, like sightings over a nuclear storage range, which would put national security at risk. Maybe they wanted to get him off the trail. Like this is one of the narratives. But, you'd feed him this false information, this counterintelligence, and then you'd hear him go out there and flap his gums, and you'd see what came back and what he was telling people. And then all you had to do was basically catch him with his pants down and say, hey, this guy said this, and this is known to be false. Now we can just take 100% of everything that comes out of this guy's mouth, and we can just throw it right out the window. See, that's the problem with being dragged into this game. And this is an ugly game. If you thought politics was an ugly game, try stepping into the field of UFO research. It's just strange, and stranger. And then you start to make sense of what you're seeing, and then all of a sudden you stumble across something that, somebody else who's a devout believer in the same thing you believe in, maybe but they're a devout disbeliever in one of your facts. So then you become public enemy number one. Like, no, this guy's a phony because he's stating this or that. It's just so divided. And I think that's to the detriment of researchers, because it's like we're all trying to get to the same end here. What's that end? It's not like we're all trying to say, hey, Giorgio's Tsoukalos and the meme that was going around all throughout the mid to late 2000s to the mid 2015, 2010s. It's aliens. It has to be aliens. Let me get out my big hair and throw my hands up and raise my eyebrows. Aliens. It's all got to be aliens, man. Because, that's the common perception of somebody who's saying, oh, I want to get to the, well, you're trying to get to prove your preconceived notion. And no, we're not trying to do that. We're just trying to look at what's going on and not throw everything out just because we don't think, that there could be something going on. We're trying to see if there's any connections between all these stories and how they could be connected and what could be going on. And all we have right now is for anybody else, unless somebody wants to come forward claiming they're a whistleblower for me, I'd love to have you on. But we're all kind of just looking over all the same information and trying to make sense of it. So a lot of people won't even do that. They just don't have the fortitude to go there. And I mean, even just preparing for this podcast, I already read Valdez's book, A History on Phil Schneider, a book on him, another book on the Dulce Base, another book on the Dulce Base, a third book on the Dulce Base, and then Anthony Sanchez's book upon countless web forums, videos on the internet. I mean, where do you get this information from? You're not going to go to a college and request this information. I mean, it's out there, and it's a matter of trying to scoop up everything you could find, every little last drop of it, and trying to throw it to the wall and see what sticks, see what doesn't stick, see what this one says and that one says, and compare this one. It's really easy just to kind of put your foot down and say, nope, I don't believe any of it. Don't tell me, because I've already made my mind up. I'm not going to do a shred of research, but I know, you're not going to catch me slipping, make me look like a fool. So I think that's the low road right there. So moving forward to this past Krista Tilton and Myrna Hansen and her 1980 abduction with her son, and witnessing the cow getting mutilated while she was on the UFO with it. Thomas Costello, who claims he worked as a high-level security officer at the Dulce Base. Apparently, before he left the base, he took videos, photographs, made copies of the documents, and realized that a man named Kay Lomas, who was a fellow worker, had betrayed him. And apparently his wife and his son went missing. And then Costello went into hiding. He stated about how every visitor was given an ID card, and if their weight changed when they would come in and out of the base, they would have to be weighed naked in and out. And if their weight changed by 3 pounds, they were given an X-ray. make sure they didn't steal anything, shove something up a body orifice of some type, or eat something, that shouldn't have been eaten, or, stolen something that shouldn't have been stolen, trying to get something for world-changing technology out into the public past super high-level security. He stated that there was mentions of multi-legged creatures and experiments without ethics going on at Dulce. He even mentioned the name of someone who was running the genetic experiments, named Larry Devin. I would love to tell you that I've done my background homework on him. Just unfortunately, this is the first time I've heard him through this book. I will try to follow up to see what I can come up with. I can't comment further. Costello just gave this name of the person that was running these experiments there. So, I would have to, let's just see real quick if I look this up, what I even see. I'll just say Larry Devin genetics, or something like that, or yeah. Unless I spelt that name wrong. I don't believe I did. I'm not coming up with anything. So that neither helps me or hurts me or does anything for me. So as of right now, just a name, and then we'll just leave it at that, unconfirmed. And I'm not going to speculate. There's just too many players in this game to speculate. Just getting this information together to do this podcast was a headache enough. Never mind trying to speculate on every single angle of every single, it's just trying to, I think the most difficult part was just trying to get stuff to line up. And that's how to corroborate. Well, this one said this. All right, well, what did this one bring forward? How can we corroborate this person? What did this one say? How can we corroborate that? And did this person's story match this? Were they both making this stuff up? Are they both real people with real stories? Or is this all not, So I think that's the hardest part of this, is just trying to sift through it all and just trying to see what lines up. And it's almost like doing a investigation, some sort of like a homicide investigation, who's hanging out with who knows what, who said what, who saw what, who's stating that they were there or they weren't there, who has an alibi, who doesn't have an alibi, trying to build a case. And as of right now, I do know that when I read Colonel X's account of who this guy Thomas Costello was, apparently, as I will show you on my screen shares, that this guy actually had some information, including a military discharge, DD-214, which I did compare to some acronym or some sort of other time appropriate document occurring with his document the year he was discharged. And I've seen other DD-214s from those years. So, all the format was correct. Only information redacted was sensitive information, such as specific date of birth, social security, stuff that would immediately identify this person. And it sounds like he, from all his trouble, that he did not want to be identified. So unfortunately, probably fortunately for him, because if this place is real, it doesn't sound like you would want to be identified. It sounds like you would want to be a anonymous whistleblower, because right now, 2023, believe it or not, if these experiments are going on and if these facilities are real, you are not offered protection. So you would not be able to come out and speak about this. Probably some sort of charge of treason against you. And if you work for the government or the military, that, if it was a top secret project, I don't even think how they would handle that would have to be made public. So, you're taking a big risk is what I'm saying. if any of this was real. So, but just using him as a, like I said, do your diligence, bouncing the name Thomas Costello off of this guy, who stated that per his discharge papers and per his story and per the classification that I saw on the discharge papers, that he worked for a security group that does the base security there, if Dulce is real, called DSD3, Dulce Security Division, and the 3 stands for Army, Navy, and Air Force. So you have members of the elite, forces of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force working there as a security team to gather intel, find out where the leaks are, find out who's talking about this place, find out what they could find out, and especially above all, find out who worked there that signed the papers that are claiming they're going to keep their mouths shut for the rest of their lives, that are now out there blabbing their mouths. They're especially responsible for figuring out who these types of people are and making sure that they shut up by whatever means necessary. So he stated that Thomas Costello did not exist per his connections. He said he checked back with his team. He checked back through the records. He checked back in the database. He checked everywhere he could check. And unless this guy used a pseudonym, which he potentially could have, citing protection for his family. I mean, I don't know. If I was him, and this was real, I probably wouldn't come forward with my real name. It'd probably be a smart move right there, actually. Especially when he came out. What did he come out in the... This is around the time Krista Tilton was talking. So, what, late 80s, 87? Yeah. So, I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't comment. All I can comment is that the person who came forward with the most credible information as far as passing 2 independent polygraph tests given by retired police officers who are very competent at giving these tests. So not only did he pass, this is Sanchez's whistleblower, Colonel X, he passed 2 independent. I'm going to post these up so I can talk up, since I'm talking about it now. I'll just do it right now. I'll post them up. I'll post up, and then I have a second document where it zooms in on the area, which talks about his role over in Arriba County at the security division. And it's just a special attention because, I'm also going to throw up a diagram from what some of the whistleblowers are saying, the layout of the base, how it is, and how many levels there are, what each level deals with, and what the entrances and exit of the base deals with. And like I said, I'm going to put up this whistleblower that Sanchez brought out, his DD-214 form with all sensitive information redacted. Surprisingly, he left up his discharge. Looks like he left up his date of discharge, which I don't know how many people got discharged on the day he got discharged, but you'd figure that'd be sensitive information also. But, I mean, maybe not that sensitive, How many thousands of people get discharged every day from the military? How many thousands of people serve in the military? So maybe it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I blew it up. I showed the DD-214, and then in the second document, I did this function that my Mac had where I could put a magnifying glass over a certain part of the document and make that part extra big. So I just blew up the bottom part where it says remarks, and it makes a reference to this man serving in Rio Arriba And I think he said Dulce's official name was the Rio Arriba Technical Auxiliary Laboratory. That was the official government name for the contractors that worked out there. And the different levels were just kind of off the top of my head here, and just quickly looking at the picture, they had like the Humvees and the Apache helicopters, which this whistleblower states were commonly seen in the area. And they are. When you interview a lot of these people, they talk about these black Apache helicopters unmarked flying around all the time. Secret entrances to the base that are covered up either by fake rock facades on the side of hangar doors or tarpaulins that are pulled out to make it look like country terrain that they could pull back for landing pads. So that was level 1. 2 was like housing for people that worked there. And they had a pool, a commissary there. Level 3 was laboratories and where they do work. And I think they had, in level 2, they also had a infirmary or like a office if somebody got like a cut hand or something like that, like nothing crazy, but for minor wounds and stuff like that, they had an area where somebody medically with a minor injury could get help, like a nurse station of some type. And then there was apparently the levels 4, 5, 6, 7 were all off limits, or at least mostly off limits for people. If there was these grays that had originally inhabited this location, that was their domain, and some of the older inhabitants there didn't want humans down there, and some of the younger inhabitants broke off and started working with the contractors in order for them to get certain resources. They would call them the dissidents. That's per this whistleblower. So this guy's stating, that Thomas Costello was a made-up person. And I think Krista Tilton mentioned at some point that he had a box with some pictures and one of these ray guns that this being had. He buried them in a safe location in Arizona. I don't know, like if she knew about where the box was. I mean, this never came to light. You'd figure at some point you'd want this to come out. I mean, if you're talking about it all the time, so. I don't know. I am scratching my head about that also. Was that just disinformation, or, did this guy go out and hide something that they stole from there and then he got disappeared or died? I mean, I don't know. I don't really know enough about this person, where he was, and other than what I read about him and some of the claims that he's, I saw the pictures supposedly that he released of the facility. And people are saying that those are, he had some security camera photos too, or videos too, and people are saying that those are nonsense. I mean, how would I be able to confirm either way? If they were, they weren't. It's kind of hard to just take a look at a set of pictures and say, okay, well, yeah, this proves there's some sort of alien base, government alien base under a mountain. I mean, you could show anybody pictures of anything. I mean, if the place existed, you could take real pictures of the place and show it to them, and I think they'd still be able to tell you the same thing. Like, how the hell do you know what you're looking at? Even if it is super weird. I mean, in 2023, we live in the age of CGI now. It's like, what couldn't you fabricate if you really wanted to? So that's why this is such a sticky situation. It's just, there's just so much coming forward with this. It's kind of like hard to tie it all together and corroborate it. Just kind of just starts to mostly look like disinformation, like it's hard to tell, but cause for concern is that when you have something like what I was just talking about, why I got into this area of this topic, is that we have this classification on this man's DD-214, which states 14NR staff Rio Arriba County DSD-3. My research, and through the faith of trusting the author of that book, Anthony Sanchez, and anybody else I've heard about that area, there's not much going on out there in Rio Arriba County. It's not like there's a military base or anything like that. There shouldn't be any military presence out there. I think there's just like a small police station. So how the hell did this guy have? How the hell did this guy have full retirement under special order for DSD-3 service out in Rio Arriba County? You know, and then he comes forward with this story about how he worked for this security division out there at this base, this alien or this gray, because I think they consider themselves sub-Terrans. They don't consider themselves aliens. Apparently they look at, from his information, they look at humans as the squatters here on this planet. They were there before we were, so, or they were at least out there under that mountain long before we ever came here to the United States, you know, and even the Native Americans going back tens of thousands of years. So he's stating that he works at this security division for this gray inhabited alien government biogenetic laboratory out there under this mountain, the Archuleta Mesa. And how do you account for the fact that this guy's comes forward with this classification that is not found any other DD-214, but yet officially given directly from the government, filed through the author, signed for by the whistleblower, redacted just for the purposes of publishing it in the book, but had no chance to fabricate this information. This came directly from the government. So if that doesn't make you scratch your head, I don't know what will, because this is the most credible information that I've found to date that would quantify any facts about there being a Dulce base existing. The fact that this man had an official DD-214, which is a military discharge paper stating his work under full retirement, meted under special services for DSD-3, which was the security division that manages the base out there. And it states that this man worked there, and that's why he was given full retirement. And it states that this division, which he goes into deep detail about in his book, a classification not given in any other DD-214 nor ever seen before, so some sort of unknown classification that he goes into strict detail about in his book, strictly relating to the Dulce base and the existence of it. He has on his government-issued DD-214 directly from the military, and I will post it on the YouTube video, staff. So he worked out in Rio Arriba County for the United States military under the Air Force. Mind you, again, there is zero military presence officially out there in that county. So how does that jive? You know, like how else could you explain that? That should at least make you seriously scratch your head. And I'm not necessarily saying, who knows, you know, this guy himself could have been a disinformation agent, but why? Why go through all that? You know, why go through all that ruse? Sanchez said when he was doing the interview with him, the guy heard a bang and he jumped up out of his chair and pulled out a gun. He was so jumpy and went to his window and pulled the blinds down. Like, you know, why go through all of that and then take lie detector tests and, you know, pass them? And, you know, so if this guy was all about telling lies, I mean, you think something would have came out about him, but apparently he came forward just enough to tell his story, but just enough not to get caught telling the story. So that's an interesting book, UFO Highway by Anthony Sanchez. And the fact that to date, this is probably some of the closest information that I could say that backs up an account that there is a base over there at Dulce. But again, that's the thing with whistleblowers. They, first off, don't make good whistleblowers when they know they're going to get killed for talking about what they're talking about, which is why this man redacted all of his personal information on his DD-214, because he didn't want to come forward. So though he was a type of whistleblower, I mean, in order to be a true whistleblower, I guess you have to come forward and, you know, make a public claim of who you are and, who, but I, again, stated 2023, there is no protection. If this was real, if this base is real, this, there's zero protection offered for an individual like this. So, if this was real and this man was then slotted for termination based on treason, he's effectively a dead man, and there's really nothing anyone's ever going to do to help him. Because if you go to anywhere else and state like, oh, the news going to help you? The government's barely even admitting that, these Tic Tac objects that have been all up in the news are definitely alien. It's like, what do you think they're going to start talking about? Underground genetic biolaboratory? Like, who are you going to cry to? You got no one's going to back you up. No one's going to protect you. The government's not going to protect you. I mean, if anything, it would be the government that's taking part in this, as as convoluted as that sounds, but it's like, Senate doesn't have a clue about half the stuff that's been going on up until this past 5 years, even anything, even any of these sightings, any of this work, any of these thousands of hours and decades of research. So it's like, this could just be one other facet of a complicated matter that goes beyond just lights in the sky or, us and them. And this kind of develops into a much broader story at some point. And that's why this topic is so interesting to a lot of people. I'm going to try to just roll through what we got left without taking up a whole ton of extra time, as I'm already at the approximately hour and 43-minute mark. So I'm going to try to I'm already got about 2 pages of notes left to go through, and I could probably just bang that out quickly. I mean, try to go into as much as I can, because like I said, after all the research I did, might as well not go weak now. But that's the most credible information I found, and I'm obviously going to post that with my video, is that you got a whistleblower here through this book, UFO Highway, passes 2 independent polygraph tests by retired police officers, and gives military discharge papers that shows his job classification out in the area where Dulce would be on his military discharge papers. So, I mean, what do you want? If this was real, you're not going to get a smoking gun. I mean, it's effectively the closest thing to a smoking gun that has come forward just as of yet. And when you read his account, it moves. Like, this guy gave an interview with this guy Sanchez, and he was able to tie, almost like a little too tight, all these key players together, what they knew, what they didn't know. He looked up this one, he looked up that one, this one, who was telling the truth, because he's like, I'm telling you who's telling the truth. I'm the one who worked there. I'm the one who worked for security for this place. Like, I know who was there, who wasn't, who should have been there, who shouldn't have been there. If this guy's telling this story, this guy's not telling this story. Like, I'm the one that actually knows the true account of what happened there, what goes on there. So when these people come forward, he was able to talk about Phil Schneider. And, for those of you who don't know, I didn't even get into that yet. Maybe we'll just kind of roll through that. Yeah, we'll just kind of get into that real quick. I'm just going to kind of move forward without jumping ahead. UFO researcher John Anderson went to Dulce and saw a caravan of McDonnell Douglas Mini Lab in a van going up near a rural compound. He saw 6 UFOs rapidly hovering over the compound, then shoot up. And then some government vehicle was trying to follow him around. He was trying to take underground sonography or sonograms of the mesa to try to see if there were caverns under there. Anybody who tries to do any active research stated on top of the fact that this is protected government land. It's Hickory Apache land, reservation land. It's like the perfect storm because it's isolated, it's high, it's hard to get to, it's in the middle of the countryside, it's on reservation land. You need to be connected to even get out there, and if you can get out there, you need to be even further connected to have the correct resources to do any research out there. So I mean, it it leads to a lot of speculation because it's hard to get out there. It's hard to actually do. And then when you do get out there, if you figure this story corroboration is real, you think it's going to be that easy. You're just going to walk out there on the side of this mountain and be like, hey, there's a base here. I'm going to, hold up a little meter in my hand and, take some readings and then be able to confirm that or not confirm that. Yeah. If there's a secret base, with the first level over 150 meters under the ground, like, good luck. It's just going to look like you're outside on the side of a hill somewhere. So it's really, like this guy's basically just confirming what I'm saying right now. It's hard to do any, if not impossible, scientific research. You have to worry about altitude sickness. If you walk up there, you need a damn lot of water because you're going to be hiking a whole lot, and it's hard to get up. It's hard to breathe. It's very rough terrain. And just getting up there is hard enough. Never mind actually trying to get any research done or anything. It's almost, you'd want to get up there with some ground penetrating radar and all that, and it's very difficult to do any sort of scientific research out there, which leads to the propagation of speculation about what's going on or what's not going on. And I can't comment further. Multiple people have come forward stating that there's a facility out there and they've seen these alien grays. Linda Moulton Howe wrote a book called An Alien Harvest. And this looks like a woman in 1980. She said she was abducted. Yeah, this is Myrna Hansen. So this is in Linda Moulton Howe's book also. So I've been meaning to read that over the years. Just, it seems like it's out of print. And I saw some copies of it, but they were like ridiculously expensive. And when she was there, Myrna Hansen said she saw some cow parts and human body parts and some sort of vats of liquid. Very strange. And then I'm just not going to spend too much time on this, even though there might be some truth to it. It's just such a mess. It's such a sticky mess. You gotta just go on YouTube and just Google the name Phil Schneider and watch his videos. I mean, I have this app where I could speed watch YouTube videos because there's just so much information out there. This guy's got hours of YouTube videos out there. You can just put it on 2 or 3 speed and just kind of just cram through it, try to just bang them all out, all the videos out, try to process some of that information. It's a lot of stuff about a new world order and him being at the base during a firefight in the 1979. And that's originally why Anthony Sanchez, this whistleblower, got involved with this whole event. He was a psychologist there to debrief these people that survived this firefight. According to him, I'll get into that after. I'm not gonna jump ahead. I'm gonna try to just keep the timeline. Long and short of it, Phil Schneider surfaced somewhere around 1995 on the UFO circuit. He was telling a story about how he was involved as a U.S. government geologist and engineer with a firefight. He assumed that he was more important in this role of being in this firefight, as was stated by the former whistleblower I just mentioned with the verification of his DD-214 papers. He stated that this shootout did occur. Schneider claims that there was a shootout at the Dulce base between contractors and these gray beings. And the reason why was, Schneider said he was doing some sort of geological research and he stumbled upon this base during this geological research as he drilled a hole deep down into the ground, and then he smelt this horrible smell, and then he saw some gray beings stand there and he started shooting at it. And Schneider basically put himself right in the center of the beginning of this firefight, like he's the cause for this firefight to happen, and eventually contractors were killed. Special forces were brought in, was it Rangers or Recon, and they were also, I think, a total of, he claims 65 people were killed when all was said and done for this event. And then these people had to be debriefed to see if they were mentally stable enough to leave this facility after witnessing what they had witnessed. And that's why they brought this guy, Colonel X, in. They brought him as a psychologist to help administer some sort of stress-reducing drugs and to try to debrief some of these people, contractors, to see if they were like mentally fit after what they had witnessed to go back out into society and try to not become unraveled, after seeing something paradigm shifting like that. Long and short of it is Schneider claimed to have 13 attempts made on his life after he started talking about what he was talking about. Colonel X confirms this clearance level. I think he stated it was like security level Rhyolite 38 was a real clearance level, and that I think the group or the security team at Dulce believed that Schneider was killed in this event. Somehow, with all the madness and all the craziness and all the paperwork, this guy slipped through the cracks. Like they thought that he was listed when he went back and checked his paperwork. This guy Schneider was listed as missing or MIA, stated that maybe he was taken down to one of the lower levels by these gray beings, killed or not accounted for, not recovered for whatever reason. So effectively MIA. So there was a group of people that effectively went MIA. They were just missing for and assumed dead at this location during this incident in 1979. So when this guy Schneider surfaced and he started talking about this Rhyolite 38 security level clearance, he automatically went on the radar of this DSD-3 security group that is responsible for protecting this facility. Being that he was a worker, being that he signed non-disclosure, he was automatically slotted for termination, and he stated that he would be on the circuits. If you watch these YouTube videos, that when he started speaking about this, effectively looked like he was already battling with something terminal. I think he said cancer or something, so maybe he didn't have long for this world anyway. So he figured if he's going to go out, he might as well go out telling the truth. And effectively, he was found dead in a hotel after, I read multiple accounts. One of them was he got into his car one day and he was riding down the highway and his tire of his car popped off. He flipped his car over and then he realized that somebody had sawed the bolts off the backside of the car so the tire would fall off. It was done just enough to where the tire was on it when he drove it, but then when he got up to highway speeds, it would fly off the car. He said there was multiple attempts on his life, and eventually they found him. Originally, it looked like they were stating in a hotel room dead after a couple days from a stroke. And his ex-wife stated that she believed that he did not die from a stroke. There was something very odd about his death because he said he was trying to get his health up. He was doing his best to keep his health together. And when they looked again at the body, they found out there was a catheter cord tied around his neck to where he actually died of, I don't know if it was the blood strangulation or just strangulation. So effectively, he was strangled, self-inflicted. So they deemed it as a suicide. And he was with a friend that weekend, and his friend stated he was talking about buying property. He was talking about, like, the whole weekend he was with his friend. The guy's name was Mark Ruffiner. And he said that this guy was in good spirits on January 6th and 7th. And eventually they found out he was killed on January 12th. Or that's what they speculate, because his friend said he wasn't in any sort of a mood that thought he would be talking about suicide or depression, nothing. And the next thing you know, this guy turns up dead in a hotel a few days later. And he had so many injuries, apparently, from the shootout. If you ever see these videos, like half of one of his hands were missing. He had this big scar on his chest, and he said it was from this shootout with these gray beings that his body was mutilated like that. So she said he had trouble even using his hands, never mind being able to tie a knot. Like he physically wouldn't be able to tie a knot with his hands, his ex-wife was saying. So she said she saw him with some strange woman with a blonde wig hanging around him. Cynthia, I think her name was Cynthia Dreyer, his ex-wife. And funny enough, she said she met up with some friends to talk about Phil's life after he had passed away, and some car rolled up and started taking pictures of her and the friends. Turned out it was the lady with the blonde hair. So the colonel who was the whistleblower for Sanchez confirmed that Schneider was executed, and that the lady with the blonde hair that was hanging around him was some sort of liaison or member of this security division for Dulce, or at least to get information or to get him to let his guard down around her. I don't know if she slipped him like some sort of drug or something like that, and then had somebody else to come and do the dirty work. But, you know, this was believed by multiple people around this guy Schneider that he was murdered. It wasn't just like nobody that was around him at the time in his life stated, oh yeah, he was depressed, he was talking about killing himself, he was this or that. And like, it was like just the opposite. He was saying that like, no, he was good. He was trying to, you know, for the stuff that he was battling with, he was still trying to get his life together. He was trying to do good for himself. He was talking about how he had multiple murder attempts and multiple threats on his life ever since he started making the UFO circuit, talking about this facility. So, and I even heard one time Richard Dolan come forward and saying that he believed after he looked into it, it looked like Phil Schneider's death was not a suicide, that he was murdered. And he didn't comment further, but he just said, well, if you think about it, you put 2 and 2 equals 4. You know, if this guy was murdered, you know, I'm not saying that his whole story was true, because we have another whistleblower that's stating that it wasn't, and there was parts of the story that didn't jive. And I will get into that right now. I'm just going to kind of wrap this up as quick as I can now. Is okay. Yeah, this is the part where I mean, I had read this book years ago, and that's what kind of piqued my interest again in this topic of the Dulce base, because you had this whistleblower come forward, and because I saw the DD-214, and I said, you know, and I'll even state to a lot of researchers, UFO researchers and such, I'll say, hey, did you read the book UFO Highway? Like, a lot of people haven't even read this book. First of all, I went on Amazon, and this book is like freaking, it's unbelievable that this book is, I think it's $400 used. I don't even think you can get your hands on a copy of this new anymore. So maybe this book is just, I found a PDF. So I think you can get a digital copy, because I downloaded a PDF recently of this book. So you can find a digital copy, but a book should not be that expensive. Maybe it's just out of print and that's why it's so expensive, but it's hard to even get your hands on this book for those of that people that have read it. And it's rare that I even come across anybody who has read this book. So just that fact alone, stacked with the fact that there aren't many people that have read this book. So how do you even make a comment on a book you haven't read, and an account you haven't heard? But, you know, on top of reading that book, the fact that, like I said, you don't go through some of the ugly stuff and some of the boring stuff. You don't get to the stuff where like, wow, you know, buried somewhere 3/4 through this book is a copy of this DD-214, which apparently backs this whistleblower's claim up. You know, I mean, you're not going to get a much closer revelation than this right now, as far as where we stand and what our laws are. So, and then this guy's kind of able to tie it all together, talking about the cattle mutilations, why they were being taken place. I'm going to kind of just run through. I had a ton of notes. I reread the interview. I tried to listen to it at work on an audio. I converted the book to a PDF, and then I ran the PDF through a program that speaks the book. So within the past, I'd say 2 days, 3 days, I basically reread this whole interview. And I took extensive notes. I don't know what's going on with the app I was using. Somehow, I just, you know, got a lot going on. So between working full time, still trying to train, still trying to keep up on my firearms skills, trying to keep up on my life skill, you know, trying to just do everything you got to do in life, just be a balanced person with your health and your life. And then trying to, on top of that, run this podcast where I effectively read 2 books and multiple news articles and took extensive notes over the past 5 to 6 days. For some reason, these notes, and I'm not even saying it like weird, like conspiracy weird, just whatever, technical weird, life weird, that stuff happens. I talk to a lot of people that are very busy people, and they're like out and about, working on this, working on that, working on this. And next thing you know, like a hard drive goes on the fritz, and like, boom, like 30% of some major project that they had gets held up. And, stuff happens in life. So it's what it is. But I did read it. I did absorb the information. I like to take extensive notes. I mean, almost to a fault. So I guess in a sense, it helps me to have these time frames. Again, I think I've mentioned this before in my podcast, because I'm the kind of person, like, if you don't give me a time limit with research, I might just go and go and go. I might read 2 books, 3 books, 4 books, 5 books, and then think, oh, well, maybe there's another book I can read. Maybe there's another article I can read. Maybe there's another way I could brush up. And before you know it, it's like, do you have to read 10 books to do an hour or 2 podcast on a subject? I mean, so I'm going to try and sum this up in the quickest amount of time possible. This is Sanchez's whistleblower. States that the original Dulce base was subsequent to something called the Muroc expedition in 1940, where they were looking for suitable places of an ad hoc team of explorers and army military men to look for underground nuclear explosion test grounds. They came across the Archuleta Mesa, and they knew that, based on having a geologist with them, that the ground was rife for areas where there'd be cave pockets and such. So they thought it would be a good place to explore, look for some underground locations, maybe to be testing these nuclear bombs. And lo and behold, they came across an area deep down inside of some of these caves with machines connected to flat screens. They thought it was some sort of German technology at first. And then they realized, as they followed the caves into a more artificial type of structure deeper down inside the caves, that it was like, it started off as a cave, and the deeper down they went, it started looking more artificial and more artificial. And eventually it was almost like flat screen TVs on the walls. When they put their hands on the walls, it was like a bioluminescence. Like, it was very strange. Then they found a section of this area where there were some dead Indians with Colt revolvers next to them. And then next to them, there were other beings that had large skulls and large eyes, but they found only skeletons. They also found a bunch of steel tablets in a lot of these rooms, which they were eventually able to get language experts using Akkadian cuneiform, but it looked more refined than Akkadian cuneiform, and it was very refined the way it was written on these steel tablets, but they were done with some sort of machine, and they were a lot of them, so they got language experts to really get cracking on what this language was and what it meant. And eventually they were able to translate it, and they were able to get a whole history of these beings that were under this mesa. So they figured, per these tablets that they found, that the inhabitants under this mesa had been there for quite some time. We're talking approximately 30,000 years. And that was subsequent to some sort of genetic malformity that, made them have to seek an area where they wouldn't be exposed to solar radiation, where they had higher humidity levels, higher temperatures. That's how they thrived better. And let's get a history real quick. I'm just going to go off the top of my head with this. Well, apparently there was, all in all, after... I'll get into this after. I'm going to kind of just try to sum this up. This is real complicated stuff. I mean, you could try to download the PDF version of this book and read it. Anthony Sanchez's UFO Highway. It has a lot of this information in there, but I don't want to spend a whole ton of time getting into this, because this is where it gets kind of complicated, and it's almost to the point where, like, for me to really give it justice, I'd have to give it that like extra hour to like talk into it. And, you know, I think it's, if you have a lot of interest in this stuff, if you think it's nonsense, then you're going to think it's nonsense. And why are you going to waste an hour of your life trying to, you know, listen to it or research it? But if you think there's something there, you could take a look for yourself. So you can either find a PDF version of this book or get a paper copy of this book. And I doubt you want to spend a couple $100s on a book like this, though. So I'm sure you can. Was able to find myself a PDF version of this book and download it to my phone. So if you poke around enough, you probably can find a copy of it if you're really interested in reading it. But so what happened was, eventually there was a battle in 1940 when they finally found these inhabitants, and they realized that they were able to, after this battle and after they sealed up the entrance and took all this technology away from the level 1 and level 2 of what they found, they were able to build some sort of a working relationship with the inhabitants of this facility. And it's turned out to be these gray beings, these inhabitants that were already there, that already had access to technology for at least a couple hundred years. And like I said, they've been down there for 30,000 years. So according to this information, and they were seeing like this computer age technology with like layers of dust on it, like it hadn't been touched in hundreds of years. So that's the sort of technology that they had going on down here. What, hundreds of years ago, if not thousands of years ago, they were using this high level technology inside this this whole facility under this mountain down there. They kind of just stumbled upon it while looking for these areas to light off nuclear bombs. So they eventually built a relationship with these beings, and what happened was the deal that was struck, and this is like where we get to all this talk about government workers working with aliens. So per this whistleblower, and this is, like I said, per the lie detector test passed and per the military discharge papers, this is the most valid whistleblower via my research that I could come across. Per this whistleblower, I think that would be a inconsistency with the facts to state, oh, there was aliens working with the government. Aliens is a term, effectively we're saying extraterrestrials, and per this information, these are not extraterrestrials. These are a group of hominids that were essentially genetically constructed by some sort of progenitor race. And this kind of lines up with a lot of other research I've done over the years. You know, like I was a big proponent. I came across a scientific paper that was published in a journal in 2015. And there was this structure that they found on Mars, and it was just a little too geometrically symmetric to be just like a random mound in the middle of nowhere. It was like the base to the height of this object was almost per like inches exactly. The height was exactly half the base. It was like if you cut the base in half, like that was the height of this object. It was almost precise. The sides were perfectly exactly as long. It was like a three-sided, I think a four-sided mound or a three-sided. It might have just been a pyramid. I forget. It's been a couple of years, but I just remember reading over all the technical stats of this object, and I'm like, whoa, this object certainly seems like something that wasn't naturally formed. It seems like something, and on top of that, there's just multiple videos and sightings, and you know, even with the Mars rover, like they're constantly pulling stuff off. And it's not just conspiracy stuff. Like if you look at these pictures, like you don't have to be a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon to like look at some of these pictures that they're pulling off the surface of Mars and being like, whoa, that does not look like a rock formation. Like there's like some there's some like right angles on that, and like, you know, you don't like objects, like types of shapes and objects. Like another one I saw maybe about 10 years ago, it looked like some type of spider or crab or something was nestled up under some rocks in a shadow taken from a picture of the rover. I mean, this was clear. You zoomed in on this picture, you saw this thing. It was like, that definitely is not a rock. It's definitely not a plant. It looks like some sort of like a spider or crab, like hiding up under the side of that rock, like clear as day. Like, so they're just finding stuff all the time on Mars that just doesn't jive with the fact that Mars wasn't once habitated. I think as far as NASA or any scientists on the record are willing to go, they say, well, we have evidence that there were oceans there once. I think it goes a lot further than that, because I think this information from this whistleblower kind of like loops back into that and states that this progenitor race that originally settled on Mars, and we're talking 1 million years ago, like this progenitor race, their first stop of wanting to settle in our solar system was Mars. Mars had an atmosphere. Mars had oceans. Mars had vegetation. Mars was effectively just as nice as Earth was 1 million years ago. I think some sort of cataclysm happened where like a meteor or something slammed into Mars, and it just destroyed the atmosphere there. So, I mean, and we even have, to this day, like, I think, is it Phobos, one of the moons? Like, I saw a picture, and you had an astronaut go public with this, and he goes, there's a obelisk on one of the moons of Mars, and there's a clear picture of this obelisk on this moon. And you're like, wow, that is certainly not a natural formation, and it certainly shouldn't be there, because there's no other lumps or rocks in that whole moon. And all of a sudden you have this like giant obelisk there in the middle of nowhere, clearly some sort of like monument. And who the hell put that there? So it's like, I think the bottom line is that if you start really looking between the lines, you start seeing that there's a reason why NASA spent boatloads of money to get back to Mars and to put billions of dollars to get rovers back up there, because I think there's something to be had up there. I think once we start putting boots on the ground up there, I think it's just going to become public knowledge at some point. They're going to say, hey, we're finding all this stuff in the rubble, I think there was a solid, I don't know exactly how advanced they were, but I think they're going to find out that there was some sort of a civilization there at some point, some sort of a cataclysm. And there's even a whole book on them doing satellite data of some sort of element that they found in the atmosphere, and it's non-naturally occurring. And they're like, well, how the hell did all this element get up in the Martian atmosphere? There's like no reason for this element to be there. It's usually the subsequent to like a nuclear explosion or some sort of technology. It's not a naturally occurring element, but there's an abundance of it in the Martian atmosphere. Unless you want to start coming forward with some hypothesis that we were testing nuclear weapons in the Martian atmosphere, like, it's just in a concentrated amount that's beyond anything that we would have been testing. There's just a lot of inconsistencies with the narrative of what's been going on up there up until about now. And the reason why I'm mentioning that, looping back around to the whistleblower, is because the Greys under Dulce stated that per their tablets, per their history, that's how they kept their history, because they know, like we know, if you have a hard drive, it's like makes for cool technology, makes for like useful technology, but if something cataclysmic happened to our civilization 100 years from now, a hard drive would be useless, or eventually they just degrade because they're the way that the chips are held together. Like, it's not something that's going to stand the test of time, like the way that we stand right now. Like 1 million years from now, your hard drive's not going to retain information that it has on it right now. It would just degrade through just the magnetism wearing out, the circuits breaking down. It's just oxidation. I'm sorry. There's many factors that make the technology that we use now something very useful and very effective for us in the meanwhile. But if we were wiped off the face of the planet today, and a civilization came across 500,000 years from now and discovered us, I mean, how much of this would actually still be useful to anybody, But apparently they figured out that inscribing their text on these alloy tablets that will stand the test of time is a way for them to record their history effectively, because some sort of cataclysm could happen, and these tablets could be discovered 500,000 years from now, 1 million years from now, maybe more, 2 million years from now. They could be buried in an area where they're, found by future generations, hundreds of thousands of years, if not more, in the future. So maybe a more effective way. And what type of alloy it is, I don't know, but something that would stand the test of time. And so they're stating that their progenitors came, settled on Mars approximately 1 million years ago. They were thriving for approximately 100,000 years. So there was 100,000 years of success on Mars, meaning that it was a populated planet with 100,000 years of development. There was, the Mars experiment was going well, from what I understand. And then some sort of cataclysm happened there. I don't know how long ago. I think it's approximately like 500,000, 700,000 years ago or something like that. So when we're talking about these objects, these mounds that we're finding on Mars right now that like just don't seem to make any sense geologically and that seem to be symmetrically perfect, we're talking a planet that hasn't had an atmosphere for hundreds of thousands of years. We're talking about extremely old objects. Like if planet Earth had its atmosphere blown off it today, what the pyramids of Giza would look like 500,000 years from now, 300,000 years from now, without an atmosphere pounding rain on top of them, without, like if within the vacuum of space, these objects could survive a long, long, long time. So, that's what we may be looking at on the surface of Mars. So apparently this progenitors went underground there for quite a while. And eventually they just said it was too much and they came to Earth. The atmosphere of Earth wasn't conducive to what they had been accustomed to. So they had to make genetically modified children called the Anu. And I think maybe we have another common name for these genetically modified children, the Anunnaki. I think there might be some sort of relevance there, and that they settled in the Sumer area, like, I don't know, like Greeks, like Mesopotamia area. They originally came here because they just couldn't survive anymore there. And they had the high technology to be able to do it, still. So they came here to planet Earth, and it was a problem. And the atmosphere just wasn't jiving with something that was going on Mars, and it wasn't helping them out. I don't know if there was increased solar radiation here, but it was killing them off. And so they had to genetically modify themselves, and they made this group called the Anu, which was the progenitors genetically modified second generation. And then again, the same thing happened eventually with the Anu. So they had to refine the process again, and they made a group called the Astra Albus, who eventually also experienced this same problem. So eventually they figured it out after the progenitors had died off, and there's this group left of the Astra Albus left here, who had also made a group of beings called the Eloha and Eloa, and they were made from genetic material from the progenitors' original planet, and these were the Greys. So the Greys that were here and the Greys that are at Dulce were genetically constructed beings from one of the pre-groups that were originally the progenitors that had settled on Mars, and some sort of malady inflicted them. So eventually they went underground. Like, it seems like a lot of these groups had problems with solar radiation. So the Astra Albus eventually figured the only way to fix this problem is just to use DNA from inhabitants that were already here on this planet. So they eventually started toying with the DNA of the hominids that were on this planet, and which would be some of our ancestors. And I think by toying with this DNA, they got the hominids here smart enough to be able to almost effectively be like a worker race or a help race, and also a breeding race for the Astra Albus, which, would allow them to propagate their genes onto further generations without having to worry about their kids being afflicted by the same sorts of maladies that were afflicting them. So long and short of it is that it's the timeline, apparently what this whistleblower came forward with. And about approximately 30,000 years ago, the Astra Albus eventually said to this Elo group. Let me see. Is there a pronunciation of that? Yeah. Eola. ELAELOAH. And that's what the name of their group was. And eventually I think they wanted to use them for the original keepers of the early vestiges of humanity. And then for whatever reason, they had no use for them anymore. So they kind of just put them off under this mountain, said they would be safer under there. It would be able to be a place where they could hide from solar radiation. Maybe they thought they were going to die off. I don't know what the beef was, but there was some uprising with these Greys and this secondary group at some point, and they felt maybe they were being taken advantage of by this other group. I don't really know all the ins and outs, but apparently they were under this base for a long, long time before military contractors came along. We're talking tens of thousands of years, and I think they were doing whatever they were doing with their genetic experimentations, abducting people, doing the same sort of things that they happened to this major on the Air Force Base, using people for genetic material. I don't know if that was, I think they consider themselves the dominant ones. They lived longer, they were here longer, so they thought maybe we were the ones that were the newcomers, so they didn't really look at it as anything wrong what they were doing to humans at the time. We talked about the 7 different layers of the base, what they're all for, how the dissidents came up top of these Gray group and was working with these contractors in return for technology and their expertise on genetic experiments. They were given resources, and I think they were supposed to help out these contractors get certain types of work done. The sergeant's name that was abducted in 1956 was Jonathan P. Lovett, and it was witnessed by Major William Cunningham. And I told you his body mutilations match the cows that have been mutilated. I mean, these are facts right here. So, you got to start piecing this stuff together. Say, hey, there's these cattle mutilations going on. But there was also an account of pre-cattle mutilations, when the cattle mutilations were getting a lot of notoriety in the mid-1970s, the mid-1950s. There was a person that was abducted, witnessed. So we know. It's not like we don't know. And you think our own military is going to be abducting their own people in a saucer-type ship and draining their blood and coring their rectum out and leaving them dead and naked and eyeless? I think they said his eyes were excised too. This is, this is kind of sensitive information. I think this could scare a lot of people if they saw this information. But, the way I look at it is what it is. Feeling any sort of type of way about it's not going to change the facts. So what the implications are, that's something publicly we have to come forward as a group of people and first admit that this stuff is going on before we can start trying to come up with some sort of moral ground to say what's right and what's wrong and what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. And I think there was a firefight after that 1956 incursion. So if you want to sit there and say, a member of the military goes missing, gets effectively brutally murdered and mutilated and dropped back off a couple miles away, witnessed by another major of the military, and that the military didn't look into this and figure out who did it. This was just a big question mark. We don't know who was flying that disc-shaped ship. That thing just picked up one of our members of our military, brutally murdered them, and dropped them back off on our property in our jurisdiction. And we're not going to have an answer to that. And apparently the word was there was an answer to that they went down there to this establishment down here under the mesa, and they wound up killing a bunch of these gray beings due to that. And then again, it was strictly and the group of grays were strictly informed that this is no longer to take place. This type of behavior will not be tolerated, and you will stop abducting people and killing people. This in the way that Mr. Lovett was actually killed, and this is a true story. This isn't some sort of fabrication for a podcast. This man was actually abducted by a dish-shaped object, and he was mutilated like a cow. I mean, this is horrible. This is the kind of stuff that gives people nightmares, Apparently, they're stating that, or this whistleblower is stating that this group of beings under the Archuleta Mesa were responsible for this, and the people that were running the security establishment at the time had zero tolerance for that, and they went down there and killed a bunch of these beings because of that. And then, again, there was peace made through the 50s and the 60s, and they said, hey, here's the deal. You guys can continue whatever the hell you're doing with your genetic this or that. I don't know what you guys do with your genetic testing, or you're trying to modify your genetics maybe to make you guys healthier, whatever they do, whatever their MO is as a group. The contractors or the government, made some sort of a deal and said, you are allowed to operate and do what you do. You just can't be mutilating and killing people. I think we got to put our foot down to this sort of behavior. That's not going to fly. But you can take cows, So if you need the cows to do your, whatever it is that you do, and that's a useful product for you, we can offer you to say, we will turn a blind eye to you taking cows. That's not a problem to us. We don't want you taking people, So again, this was going on, and this is when the rash of cow abductions was going in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and when they were starting to be noticed. And then apparently this other firefight happened in the late 1970s, and this was in regards not to what Phil Schneider said. I think he put himself at the center of this whole operation. Apparently that was fictitious information, according to this secondary whistleblower. Phil Schneider was there, I think, just working as a geologist, and he got caught up in the middle of this mess. But I think what happened was a bunch of these contractors found out that this security division, DSD3, let their guard down in the 1970s, and these older gray beings at the bottom of this facility decided that they wanted to continue their genetic experimentation or whatever the hell they were doing, either killing or abducting people. I don't know what was going on, but it was when the contractors at this base found out what was going on, they apparently got very angry, and there was another incursion of a lower level that these contractors weren't supposed to be at, and that's what sparked another firefight. And that's where these 65 people turned up dead. And this Colonel X was brought in there to administer propanol hydrochloride. That's what he was to do. He was brought in there after this firefight, given 48 hours to be at that base. And basically he was going to debrief all these survivors to see if they were mentally stable enough to be put back into society after this firefight. They were given this propanol hydrochloride, which was supposed to combat the effects of traumatic events. And meanwhile, I'll be showing you a rendition from Sanchez's book of the gray disc type object that may have, without talking to the witness, abducted that soldier back in the 1950s, that style of disc type object. A picture of a recreation of the Greys and their symbol. Apparently on all their technology, they had this symbol. It was like two ovals and a circle all coming together. in a type of three-way connection. They had this symbol that they put on everything that they made, all their technology, some of their tablets. And then once they started working with these beings, they had like security access points where they would have a scan for the Greys, who would had a ID card they would wear around their neck because they didn't have names. They'd have to be identified when walking around this base. So they got assigned some sort of hexadecimal number. These weapons that were used during these shootouts, and some sort of like a handheld plasma type weapon. Their hangars that looked like they were covered in glass, and they almost like their propulsion systems like altered the ceiling of the hangar, like the space-time in the area, whatever sort of technology they were using. So it's just apparently this whistleblower showed the author a box full of Polaroids that he took from the base with all this stuff in there, and he wouldn't let him make any copies, or he wouldn't let them keep it, but he let them at least look at the Polaroids and really take detailed notes without being able to actually take pictures or make copies of these pictures at the time. So that's based on these. I will include all of that on my presentation. Where were we at? Okay, yeah, all right. So without getting too much into more detail, the whistleblower from Sanchez's book was brought in for 48 hours to debrief these survivors. The reason why I know so much, the reason why I'm able to tell you so much is because this guy knew so much. And it's like one of the questions came up, which was a smart question. Like, how the hell do you know so much about all this stuff going on there if you were only there for 48 hours? Like, that doesn't jive. Like, if I was only there for 48 hours and some sort of crazy information like this came forward, I'd have a hard time remembering what my name was. I'd be so overwhelmed. But apparently they threw out some detailed briefing papers that these guys were able to look at on the flight ride over. I think it was a couple hours of a flight. And they had like a couple hours to like deeply study this set of, like, we're not just talking like a small stack of papers, we're talking a binder full of papers, like a detailed history of basically everything known about the base, everything known about the inhabitants, everything known about what was going on there. Like, just so that when he came in, he could do his job correctly and basically make good decisions on who these people were, if they were okay to get out of there, what they said, if it was true. Like, you know, he was given the opportunity to be able to know as much as he could. So when he had to make decisions, executive decisions about people's lives, if they were going to be held in some sort of psychiatric facility or released back into society, that he would be able to make a correct decision. And in the melee, I think he retired a lieutenant colonel, actually, because it just says Colonel X, but I think he was a lieutenant colonel when he retired per his DD 214. Let me just take a look here. Yeah, I saw something there. What the highest rank was. I think it was lieutenant colonel. There's just a lot going on there. I'm trying to go through all this. What the commissioned officer. He was a clinical psychologist. No. Grade, retired, or rank colonel. Air Force. I don't want to state something that's not correct. I think Corso, that's what the whole Roswell thing was, a lieutenant colonel. Yeah, I'm looking at the DD 214s here, and I'm not seeing anything about lieutenant. It's just saying colonel at the top of the page. So that's, I guess, who this guy was. I guess he was just so I didn't want to go ahead and rock with that and say, oh, he was a lieutenant colonel. It just says colonel here, his rank, when he retired. All right, so we'll just stay with that then. This colonel, when he retired, I don't think at the time he was a colonel when he went in there in 79, but he was given this binder, and a colonel came around and he grabbed everybody's papers at the end of this. It was just a mess. There's people, dead bodies. They had to figure out where they're going to put the dead bodies, how they're going to remove the dead bodies. There was a tactical and logistical nightmare of debriefing people, removing bodies, figuring out what you're going to tell the families. There was a lot going on with this. And they were probably all overwhelmed, and they just barely knew how to handle what was going on. So when the colonel came around and started collecting papers, this guy was probably so wrapped up in this or that, he threw the binder in his bag when he got off the plane because he didn't want to lose it, and he accidentally took it off the base. When he went home, he realized when he got home, he still had the binder with him. So the whole time he worked there, and eventually he went on to go work for this security group within this facility as a psychologist. He kept the papers in his bag, and he was able to study these papers day after day after day. He was able to basically study them for 4 years. So if you had 4 years to study a binder with detailed information, it was absolutely fascinating information on the history of this planet, and then this and that. I'm sure you'd be able to, even if you weren't going to keep that after 3 or 4 years, you'd probably read the thing 100 times and be able to recite it forwards and backwards. And that's how many times you'd probably read it. I know that's how many times I'd probably read it. So, that's why he was able to give such a detailed existence. Oh, and another thing he stated that this Astra albus group, that was made right before they started, the ones that started genetically modifying the hominids here, and then started interbreeding with those hominids so their offspring wouldn't be affected by the same malady that was killing their progenitors from this difference in the Earth's atmosphere and the radiation compared to Mars at the time. They kept their DNA line very pure throughout the generations, and apparently there's still some very connected people, he's stating, that have a predominant amount of this Astra albus gene line, and they've kept it very linear over the generations and generations. And a lot of wealth and a lot of money is still circled around this group that basically never wanted to let go of the power, even over after generations and generations and generations of people. This will probably go back to days of royalty and days of kings and days before that, obviously, because these groups apparently have been here for thousands of years, so tens of thousands of years. So he's saying that per these tablets that this group still exists on some sort of predominant gene line. And he said maybe one of the differences that before the modification of this DNA, you didn't have a lot of difference in eye colors. You had this Astra albus group, they had very blue, what's the area, the white part is, I think, the sclera, and then the iris is this group, he said that it was mainly like blue eyes, but it was like, there was like almost all iris. It was just like, if you looked at their eyes, it was just a big blue iris. When you looked at their eyes, like that was something that was predominant. Like they had sharper facial structures, almost like, it reminded me of the way it was being described. Almost if you look at the statues of like how the kings of like Egypt, like you look at those statues, how there's like the bone structure is very defined and very sharp, and they're very tall, lanky types of people, like that sort of look or something. I don't know. I just don't have anything further other than this, what these whistleblower accounts are. And for all the people that, want to make comments and want to speculate, it's easy to do that. It really is. And there's a whole lot of information. It's just enough to just beat you down. And a lot of it just makes your head spin. I don't know. And even after, possibly trying to come to some sort of conclusion, like in my own head, of like what's right and what's wrong and the reason why this whistleblower came out also is because he said some of the genetic experiments were not good. They were trying to make super soldiers. There was some sort of dormant gene in these gray beings called the scimitar or something, and they were trying to bring that back. That was an extinct gene pool of like some sort of like soldier class that eventually was It's in here. It's not even in the index. Oh, and there was other. Yeah, it's not coming up in the glossary here. I don't know why. Scimitar or something. It's definitely in the book, and it was some sort of super soldier type of class. And they said some of their history. They said they were able to almost have like a chameleon type skin, like they were able to kind of camouflage themselves, and but they went extinct years ago. That whatever that class was, and they were doing like trying to find it in their gene pool from now. They said it was a dormant gene. They're trying to bring that back, and they're doing experimentation. And and they were, some of these people were being abducted against their will, and they're being held. And they said sometimes you'd see people down there, and they'd be look like they were being held for prisoners. Like there's just morally questionable things that were stated were going on there. And I guess this guy had a problem with it, and that's why he felt maybe he should bring this to light, because like once you start, and even Gabe Valdez said that one time he found one of these mutilated cattle. He found the uterus like open, and there was some sort of like a creature inside this cow, and he said it certainly wasn't a baby calf. He goes, it certainly wasn't a person. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is legitimately from a state trooper in the 1970s. Like, this guy found a cow that was associated with these abductions, and he found some sort of like a creature, and it wasn't human. It was not a cow. He said it almost looked like a human lizard frog, like monkey type looking thing. And it had no bones in its head. It was the strangest looking thing. Like certainly some sort of like a mutant type creature. And there's no lack of better way of describing it. So I mean, this isn't speculation. What I'm saying, what this observation that this state trooper saw wasn't speculation. Like, what the hell is going on out there? And after all the digging around, all the poking around, this is the closest thing that I could find to a legitimate whistleblower with verifiable information behind him. So, if there is something going on out there like this, would it be to the benefit of putting someone who is a worker at a facility like this under the 2023 Whistleblower Act, where they should be protected? Or, and I was talking about this with a family member, wouldn't it be? I mean, what? Let's just we want to just end this off now, because this is like a marathon podcast, because there's just so much going on around this topic. And I honestly, I didn't even cover it all, because it's just make your head spin. This is just a result of the poking around I did the past 6 or 7 days, and maybe 2 books on top of the 2 or 3 books else I read, and then just the interviews and the different forums and such, and the videos that I've watched over this topic. So to kind of sum this whole thing up, let's just say it's all nonsense. It's all some sort of different disinformation campaign. I don't know. I feel like that's the low-hanging fruit at this point, because there's a whole lot here. There's a whole lot of people talking about a whole lot of facts for that all to be made up. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't have been, but it's just, I've seen this disinformation. I've seen it. I've seen it through the Roswell research I've done. I've seen how weak it is, and I've seen how weak, like, the stuff with like the crash test dummies being dropped, and like the dates weren't even right. They weren't even close. Like it was just so factually off. Like, I've seen the low level of work that goes into these disinformation campaigns, just assuming that people are stupid, and like how laughable it is. Like, this is very, very, very detailed information, and it lines up with a lot about what's going on. And it starts to, like, this one story, this one account makes a lot of sense. It accounts for why, like somebody was saying, oh, well, there was, for example, there was a gas mask found by one of the cattle mutilations. It had to be the government then, right? It had to be. Because, if it was a gas mask, it had to be, how could it be aliens? Well, factoring in this other information, first off, it wouldn't be aliens because there was a other known group of inhabitants that were there for a long, long time that don't consider themselves aliens. They don't. They consider themselves native Terrans. This is their planet. And they've, if anything, been here longer than we've been here doing what they're doing. So that's not a, wouldn't be a correct assumption. And secondly, for whatever reason, the people that were knowing what was going on after the green light was given to do this work on the cows, they said whenever these beings took these cows, whatever their genetic experiments were they were doing on these cows, left these cows reeking like some sort of chemical. Like maybe they were using some type of chemical during this extraction of the DNA and whenever it had a flood. I don't know, during the use of this laser. But they said that's why a lot of these bugs were dying on these carcasses. That's why the carcasses aren't being picked clean. This is a fact. These carcasses aren't being picked clean. And they said he stated that part of the reason why the military and their contractors were observing which cows were being taken, and they were following up when these cows were being dropped off. Like, are they, some sort of like a tracking system? And they said when they would go near these cows, when they were first dropped back off, they would give off this odor that would make some of these military contractors so sick they would faint. So whatever chemical was being used in this process was making them sick, like nauseous, to where they would feel like passing out, like a disgusting smell, which is probably the same chemical responsible for killing the bugs and why the predators aren't picking them clean. And again, this is not fabrication. This is something that's going on out there, something strange going on out there. We know what I'm talking about is real. The reason for it is speculation. The reason for it, like who's doing it, why they're doing it, is speculation. But the fact that there's these cows that are being slaughtered out there in a strange manner and then dropped off in the middle of nowhere like it's happening from the sky is real. Like this has been noted again and again and again and again. The fact that the animals are dying, like bugs are dying when they're touching these animals, again, these are facts. Coyotes, vultures aren't touching these animals, facts. So, in this account, the colonel comes forward with his whistleblower testimony and states, yes, whatever these beings are doing to these cows, they're using some sort of a chemical, and it's corrupting the carcass of the animal to the point where nothing would want to touch it. Even when people go near it afterwards, there's a strange chemical smell that's making people sick, to the point when they decided they had to start wearing gas masks. So, which would fall in line with the fact that at one of these sites, they found a gas mask next to one of these dead cows because somebody might have just left the gas mask there after they were done. I mean, I don't know. It's like people make errors at some point. Like, nobody's perfect. But, some might say, oh, well, that's just disinformation. And then, I don't know. All I'm saying is that in all these years, all these thousands of animals that have been killed and mutilated in this strange fashion, all this going on, we have so much oversight about what's going on this planet, from NORAD to what's going on in space and radar, and we can't get to the bottom of what's going on with it. So obviously somebody knows something. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And where there's fire, there's enough smart people walking around this planet that know something. So obviously, in all these years, this has been going on for the better part of 50 years? And not one person's come forward in 50 years and talked about this and blown the whistle on what's going on. And like I said, that's why I'm talking about this, because this is the closest thing I've come to somebody who's actually blown the whistle that could actually back it up. Well, you have a fantastic story. Well, back it up. And I'm like, well, like I said, I'm not going to go back over it, but I will post it with my video that there is a discharge paper stating that this individual worked at this facility. And it's clear as day on the paper. So until somebody gives me a valid explanation for how the hell that classification got on that paper and what that means, it might just be, and what's that? The law of parsimony, or whether it's the simplest explanation. Might, instead of getting all crazy and getting all wild, like the guy had a story, he told his story, and they said, "Oh, well, here's my verification for my story. I'm telling the truth. Here's my paper, and here's the classification, just like as I told you it would be." I'm telling the truth. This is the matter, the true matter about what's going on. I am a whistleblower. I'm not going to risk my life and ruin my career and destroy my family over bringing my name forward and letting you ruin me over this. But I feel like there's enough going on where somebody should be looking into this further. I mean, it's not going to be me, but maybe somebody will pick up where I left off at some point and try to make some sense of this. And I guess because the only reason I'm even doing this, like this episode, is because who's going to do that? Who's tasked for doing that? Do you think this UAP Arrow task force is looking into what I'm talking about? I bet you $100 million. No, absolutely not. You know, so it's like they're still trying to figure out, like, well, you know, we're not sure. Like, these things are unknown. Is it foreign technology? These Tic Tac. Like, there's like super low level stuff, like not like no brainer type of stuff. Like we clearly know that we're not in possession of technology that can allow you to travel 2 miles in a half a second. So, you know, I just wanted to just kind of cap this whole marathon podcast session off from a very complicated topic that, if this is going on, you know, I don't know. I don't know. There's just a lot of implications. And you understand, if you start trying to digest this, if there is some truth to what I'm saying, and there is some truth to this whole story, and it's not just the first thing is the just disinformation, because that's what I interviewed Nuri Hayakawa, and he thought this was complete disinformation. There's no truth to anything out there. He just thinks that maybe the government's testing cows because they're concerned that there was some radiation left over from Project Gas Buggy. I don't know where exactly that's his theory, but I don't know who told him that theory or how he came up with that theory, if that was on his own. All I'm saying is that based on information available, and that is somebody who comes as close as we can get to a whistleblower, where if this thing was real, they would not be getting themselves murdered. That's about how close this guy came to telling the truth without putting his real name out there, which would effectively slot him for termination and ruin his life. So if this was real, you know, you have somebody that came forward that is verifying this to be real. And you have a lot of other accounts of people that are seeing some really strange things out in that area there. And this kind of story ties it all together in this facility that very well could be there. You know, like I said, you know, I don't know. You know, I honestly don't have the answer. All I'm saying that theoretically, disinformation possible. And then what are the other? Government facility? Well, the whole thing about the Greys, just disinformation possible. But then you have, like I said, the third option, which is the account based on a lot of this past hour that I spent on this whistleblower, who's the first of his kind to come forward and basically say, hey, I'm connected enough and I've done enough favors for enough people over the years of my life. I know I could come forward with a story and I'm not going to get myself killed doing it. But that's not everybody. And everybody's not me. And I know there's a lot of people out there that couldn't come forward with this story without getting themselves killed. So I'll do it, and then I'm out. You know, I'm going into retirement. I'm taking a new job somewhere. I'm moving with my family, and do not call me because I won't answer, and I'm changing my number. And that's basically what he said, and that's basically how he rode off into the sunset after leaving his story available for us to interpret. And I'm, like I said, I'm trying to leave this off with a very, very, very complicated story. Every angle of this story has a world paradigming possibility. Shift change, you know. This story affects Earth history. It affects every religion on this planet. It affects the way that our education system works. Like, it's really like a paradigm shattering revelation. So leaving this off with, if this were real, like the front of this book, trying to tie this whole revelation of what might be going on at Dulce together, states, are you ready for the truth? And that's the question I'm going to ask everybody. Like, are you ready for the truth? Like, if this were real, are you ready for that? Really? Like how are we as a like species? Because this doesn't only affect the United States. This affects every single human being on this planet. And how could we properly bring this information forward while mitigating damage control? And, we have to start thinking, because this stuff is coming forward, and it's coming forward at an alarming rate with whistleblowers and what might be going on out there. We have to start thinking, like, put yourself in the driver's seat. If you were the president of this country, like, how would you handle this? Like, you're the president. I just briefed you, Mr. President, Mrs. President. You just got briefed on the reality of what's going on with not all of this UFO UAP stuff, because this is a segment of it, but I would say a very impactful segment of what could potentially be going on with a certain group of beings that are associated with UFO UAP phenomena. And furthermore, the author was even asked the whistleblower, so what's the end game for these Greys? Is it just genetic testing, like this and that? Like, well, why don't they just go back to their homeworld? And he's like, well, if you weren't paying attention, this is their homeworld. Hi. Yeah. So things just got really complicated really fast. When you have this really like, oh, us and them, we're the humans, and they must be coming somewhere from tens of millions of light years away. But when it hits close to home, it starts getting really, really weird. And when it starts affecting your religion and your kids and your schools and like this gets really weird really fast for a lot of people. And to have to kind of swallow the fact that the history of this planet may be different than we're already up to this point being told. Extremely different. And a lot of these, what they've been labeling for all these years as conspiracy theories about Mars and maybe a history on there and how that might have affected, like, there might be some truth and connections between there and us and some sort of genetic manipulation, accounting for the fact that somehow 65,000 years ago, like, the area of our cerebral cortex just like rocketed up to a certain size, X amount bigger than it was, exponentially unexplainable through evolution. And how that would have lined up right around the time that this group of beings would have been doing this modification to the hominids on this planet. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that's like that's hard to swallow, and it goes back with this account a long time, 500,000, a million years of what the history of this planet may be, and how we've been affected. And this just isn't it. It's not like there's probably not other stuff going on, because there clearly is, like other accounts and other sightings and other dealings with these other beings. I mean, this might just be one group of groups that affect us closely, but there may be tens, dozens of other groups coming from other star systems or other dimensions. It might be multifaceted, if you wrap this whole story up for what it is. It might be that, yes, there are some groups that are here. They've established some sort of a base here, and they've been here. And there might be some groups that are coming from other planets. There might be some groups that are coming from they're so advanced that they're coming from a million years ahead of us, not in time, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I'm just saying that, like, in technology, and they're at the point where they could just be hopping through different dimensions. They're that advanced in us. They're interdimensional. Like, so this whole phenomenon might get a lot more weird than we thought. So, what's the appropriate level of disclosure, in that case? And I'm not answering that for anybody. I'm just stating the major problem, Mr. or Mrs. President. What do you do now that you're told this information? Do you just let the truth flow and let everybody know what the truth is? And then what are we going to have? We're going to have people lining up at the edge of this Indian reservation, ready to get a glimpse at some of these inhabitants down there. Are we going to get people joining cults and gangs and trying to say we should kill them all? Or I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying that, like, is there going to be some radical element out there that's going to say, we should exterminate these beings? That's what I'm saying. Is that, like, because they're a threat to us? Like, what are people going to freak out? Like, Is this going to cause people to reevaluate the way that they live their lives morally or immorally or religion? There's just so many ramifications of a story like this, and it's just kind of like it's just such a sticky mess, and such like kind of like a expanding type of story, and what's the correct answer morally? What's the correct answer? Because I thought about it and I was like, maybe I should really push, like should this be something I should try to like really push and try to garner to get, if this is real, to try to like ferret some more of these whistleblowers out and see if we can get this story out there. Like, I mean, like how much, like, are the people of this world really ready for a story like this? If there's any truth to it, or is the old saying that ignorance is bliss the story that rings true, that maybe not knowing a lot of this is just better off, because what do you do with it? Or if we all got all this at once and this all came flowing down within the next 6 months, the reality of anything like this actually having occurred or occurring, and is that gonna positively affect us, or is that gonna negatively affect us? And then on the flip side of that coin, if this is going on, do you idly stand by when there's some sort of genetic program going on that could be skirting the line of what you would consider moral or immoral? Like allowing your daughter or your sister to be abducted by this group and have some sort of a fetus implanted in her and then removed 4 months from now so she could be used as some sort of an incubator. Like there's accounts of stories like this coming forward now. And like, if this is done by a group like this, and we know that this group exists, and we know like where do you draw the line of like what's moral and what's immoral, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to be trying to build genetic super soldiers? Like, is that, because publicly, if we were talking about doing something like that, the country would be up in arms over doing anything. I mean, they don't even allow stem cells for being used for in this country for a research. Never mind making whole beings that are trying to, what I'm saying? Like what, like where's the truth and where's the fact of the fiction, and what exactly is going on here? And is this all some sort of big disinformation campaign? And it seems to be a whole lot more than just a couple people coming forward and just telling some sort of BS story. There's a whole lot more meat to this whole thing. And I think the easy thing to do is just to say, it's all just myths and stories and disinformation campaigns and crazy people. Like, that's the same sort of smack that was being talked about Roswell for all these years, and like all the people that have come forward, all the whistleblowers and the 600 witnesses, and now with Area 51 and everything going on out there, and Bob Lazar, how he was for all these years telling the truth again and again and again, never changed his story. Then after almost damn near 35 years after coming out, finally his story is starting to be corroborated, and it's like, wow, this guy was telling the truth. Look at that. So if it took 35 years for Bob Lazar to start getting some respect for talking about the fact that we were even trying to reverse engineer craft of any kind, like, how long do you think it's going to be before a story like this is good to go into the general public, where it's not going to be some sort of a absolute mess in society if it's brought forward by anybody in an official capacity? Like, would there have to be more Hollywood movies being made to kind of infiltrate this storyline into the movies? Like, hey, this next account of this story has a factual, some basis on fact, like how they do with some of these movies. Like, I don't know. I mean, I just really don't have the answer. Like, all I know is that I looked into it. This is what's available. This is what's there. If you want more, you could have at it. They have a conference out in the Dulce area. I think it got canceled last year and the year before due to COVID, but maybe next year they'll have a conference out there. I think it might be in August. You'd have to go to the Facebook page. So if you want to hear people's real accounts on what's going on out there, you can go to this conference, talk to people firsthand. My take is this thing is only going to get more, especially if this whistleblower act comes out and you get any more people coming out about this facility, that it's only going to get more popular as the years go on, because And there's just been so much controversy about it. So, hopefully, maybe we can get another whistleblower to come out, step at a time. We can get some more people interested in talking about this. We can get some more people trying to do some more research, getting out there. And if they know any way to get out there and get up their boots on the ground with scientific tools, I mean, we can just further the research that has been done already and try to get a further conclusion on what, if there can be any confirmation on next time a cow turns up dead. Maybe there should be some tissue samples taken. We can try to find out what the chemical composition of this chemical is that these animals don't want to touch, and who might have access to those chemicals, and try to figure, try to see what we can do with what we have. Because right now, the whistleblower, like I just talked about, that is few and far between. So if we're holding our breath, waiting for someone like that to come forward again, I mean, I don't know. It might be something that we'd have to go through this whole 2023 Whistleblower Act, try to see, if stipulations could be made inside of that to try to bring forward more whistleblowers under the premise of trying to get more people out of there. So anyhow, like I said, I'm glad I at least got to do a long episode on such a fascinating topic, and you guys stay tuned for my interview with Norio Hayakawa. Like I said, even though he wrote the foreword of the book where that whistleblower had come forward, he is sounds like he's not a full or a proponent on that there's any sort of government joint gray base going on out there. He just, for whatever work that he's done and whatever he's seen, he's just not there. He just thinks that maybe it's just some sort of government testing going on out there. But, like I said, without anything further, everybody has the right to believe what they want to believe, until they do their own research, until they bring something better forward and want to try to add to the ever-growing number of people that have talked about this, and the ever-growing number of researchers that have tried to throw their hat in the ring to try to make any sort of sense of this. I would say have at it, see what you could add to it, but I don't really think there's anything much more to bring forward other than, doing your own research, reading your own books, and then trying to contribute what you can to the field, try to get some more facts out there. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. And stay tuned, like I said, for when I finish editing the interview with Norio. I think you guys will enjoy it. Stay well. Thank you all for listening to this episode, and thank you everyone who has chosen a life of service. This is not just military, fire, police, and EMS, but also anyone who has taken their talents and passions and used them for the service and betterment of others and this world. I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying until next time. This is your host, @NotMedia, JP, signing off. Stay well, everyone.